Welcome to Crime for Sleep. Before we begin, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is for you. And don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Story 1. The eastern light filtered through thin curtains, casting long shadows across Detective Marla Cooper's desk. She turned the worn manila folder in her hands, feeling the weight of its contents: photographs, statements, and the lingering questions of a case that had haunted the small town of Millfield for nearly 3 decades. The office was quiet this early, just the gentle hum of the heating system and the occasional creak of the old building settling into the cold November morning. It was the mirror that first caught her attention when she inherited the case. Not because it was particularly unusual, a vintage piece with an ornate silver frame bolted securely to the bedroom wall of apartment 12B at the Wisteria building, but because of what witnesses said about it. How Sarah Garland, the previous tenant, had become fixated on it in the weeks before she disappeared. "The room in the mirror isn't right," Sarah had told her sister during their last phone call. Her voice on the recording was soft, controlled, yet underlined with an unmistakable tension. "Things are shifted, not where they should be, like I'm seeing through to somewhere else." The case file contained photographs of the apartment taken the day after Sarah was reported missing. Everything appeared ordinary. A small but comfortable space with modest furnishings, a half-empty cup of tea on the nightstand, a book splayed open on the unmade bed, and there on the wall, the mirror reflecting the room exactly as one would expect. The investigators had found nothing unusual about it. But they hadn't knocked on it. Detective Cooper ran her fingers along the edge of a statement from Emma Rossi, the tenant who moved in 6 months after Sarah's disappearance. Emma had lasted just 3 weeks in the apartment before breaking her lease and leaving town. Her statement had been largely dismissed at the time. The ramblings of an imaginative young woman, the original detective had noted in the margins. "I thought I was going crazy," Emma had said, her handwriting becoming increasingly erratic as the statement continued. "I kept hearing knocking from inside the wall where the mirror hung. 3 quick taps, always at 3:14 a.m. The third night, half asleep, I knocked back, 3 taps, and someone knocked back." Cooper closed the file and leaned back in her chair. The ceiling fan rotated slowly above her, creating hypnotic patterns of light and shadow. The original investigation had focused entirely on Sarah's ex-boyfriend, a man with a history of controlling behavior who had conveniently left town around the time of her disappearance. But they had never found enough evidence to charge him, and Sarah's body had never been recovered. The detective pulled out a smaller, unofficial file from her desk drawer, her own collection of notes and theories that she hadn't shared with anyone else. Inside was a property record of the Wisteria building, dating back to its construction in 1923. The architect, Harold Merrick, had designed several buildings in the area, all with distinctive features. But what interested Cooper most was the blueprint of apartment 12B, which showed something the current floor plan didn't. A small room behind the bedroom wall, a space roughly 8 feet by 10 feet, with no apparent entrance. The space where the mirror now hung. At some point in the building's history, the room had been sealed off, plastered over, forgotten. Except for the mirror that had been bolted to the wall sometime in the 1950s, according to the building superintendent's records. Cooper pulled out a photograph of Sarah Garland, 28 years old, auburn hair, kind eyes, a kindergarten teacher beloved by her students and colleagues, no history of mental health issues, no reason to simply walk away from her life. The detective's gaze drifted to another photograph paperclip to Sarah's Eliza Merrick, the architect's daughter, who had disappeared from the building in 1952. The resemblance between the two women was subtle but undeniable. Same hair color, same gentle smile. The superintendent's records noted that the mirror had been installed shortly after Eliza's disappearance. Detective Cooper gathered her files and stood up. She had a theory now, one that the department would dismiss if she voiced it. But she couldn't ignore the pattern she had uncovered. 7 disappearances over 70 years, all tenants of apartment 12B, all bearing a striking resemblance to Eliza Merrick, and all reported strange experiences with the mirror before they vanished. The current tenant, a young woman named Maya Chen, had moved in just 2 weeks ago. Cooper had casually interviewed her yesterday, asking routine questions about the apartment building for what she claimed was an unrelated case. Maya had seemed perfectly at ease, mentioning that she loved the vintage charm of the place, especially the beautiful old mirror in the bedroom. Though sometimes, Maya had added with a small laugh, I swear the reflection doesn't match up exactly with the room. Just little things, you know, like my books arranged differently on the shelf or the curtains hanging at a slightly different angle. Probably just my imagination. As Cooper drove toward the wisteria building, the weight of urgency pressed against her chest. The pattern suggested she had very little time. In the quiet of her car, she rehearsed what she would say to Maya, how she would convince her to leave the apartment without sounding like she had lost her mind. What she couldn't rehearse was what she would do about the mirror, about the space behind it that shouldn't exist according to modern blueprints, about the knocking that came from within. She parked outside the building just as the streetlights flickered on, casting pools of amber light on the wet pavement. The rain had stopped, but the air remained heavy with moisture, clinging to her skin as she stepped out of the car. The wisteria building loomed above her, its windows illuminated one by one as evening settled over the town. Somewhere on the 3rd floor, behind one of those windows, was apartment 12B, and within it, a mirror that reflected a room that wasn't quite right. A mirror that someone or something might be trying to reach through. Cooper checked her watch, 8:47 p.m. She had hours before 3:14 a.m., hours to convince Maya Chen to leave, hours to prepare herself to face whatever waited in the room behind the mirror. She just hoped it would be enough time. Story 2, the elderly couple had lived in the house for decades, their backyard overflowing with wildflowers and ivy. When new owners moved in, they decided to trim the overgrowth. That's when they found it, a section of soil darker and looser than the rest. Digging just a few inches down, the shovel hit something solid. At first, they thought it was a buried rock until they saw the strands of hair tangled in the dirt. Detective Sarah Morgan arrived at 43 Oakwood Lane just as the autumn sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the neglected garden. The air held a peculiar stillness, broken only by the distant sound of police radios crackling with static. She inhaled deeply, noticing how the scent of freshly turned earth mingled with the sweetness of overripe apples fallen from a nearby tree. The new homeowners, a young couple named James and Melissa Weber, stood by the back porch, their faces pale beneath the porch light that had automatically flickered on as darkness approached. "We just wanted to clear some space for a vegetable garden," James explained, his voice barely above a whisper. His hands, still caked with dried soil, trembled slightly as he pointed toward the far corner of the yard, now surrounded by yellow crime scene tape that swayed gently in the evening breeze. Detective Morgan nodded, her notepad remaining closed for now. She preferred to let people speak freely at first, to absorb the rhythm of their words, the pauses between sentences, the slight shifts in their gaze. Melissa Weber wrapped her cardigan tighter around herself, though the evening wasn't particularly cold. The previous owners were the Hendersons, Melissa offered. They lived here for almost 50 years before moving to a retirement community in Florida. Mrs. Henderson was known for her gardening. Everyone in the neighborhood talked about how beautiful this yard used to be. As forensic specialists carefully excavated the area, Detective Morgan made her way through the dense undergrowth. The garden had once been meticulously tended, with stone pathways now barely visible beneath crawling vines and volunteer saplings. Nature had reclaimed what had once been human domain, creating a secret place where something or someone could remain hidden for years. The medical examiner, Dr. Reyes, knelt beside the excavation, her silver hair pulled back in a tight bun, rubber-gloved hands moving with practiced precision over what was now clearly a human skeleton. "Female," she said without looking up, "probably in her 20s or 30s. Been here at least 20 years, judging by the condition of the remains and surrounding soil composition." Detective Morgan's pen finally met paper, the soft scratching sound accompanying the gentle rustling of leaves overhead. 20 years, the Hendersons had still been living here then. The quiet, elderly couple who'd been fixtures in the neighborhood, known for their Christmas light displays and summer garden parties. In the days that followed, the skeleton acquired a name. Catherine Wheeler, a 26-year-old real estate agent who had disappeared in the summer of 1998. According to yellowed newspaper clippings and faded missing persons reports, Catherine had last been seen showing a house 3 blocks away from the Henderson property. Her car had been found at the local train station, suggesting she had left town voluntarily. The case had gone cold within months, filed away among the many disappearances that occur each year, people who simply vanish, leaving nothing but questions behind. Detective Morgan spent hours in the records room, surrounded by the subtle scent of old paper and dust. The quiet hum of fluorescent lights overhead created a cocoon of isolation as she methodically turned pages of the original investigation. Catherine Wheeler had been described by friends and family as ambitious and organized, unlikely to abandon her life without warning. She had recently broken off an engagement, but her ex-fiancé had a solid alibi for the day of her disappearance. What caught Morgan's attention, buried in the supplementary witness statements, was a single line in an interview with a neighbor. Catherine had been asking questions about properties in the area, including the Henderson place. Said she had a client interested in older homes with character. When Detective Morgan visited Walter Henderson at Pine Haven Retirement Community, she found a frail man sitting by a window watching birds at a feeder. His wife had passed away 6 months earlier. His rheumy eyes lit up at the company, hands smoothing non-existent wrinkles from his cardigan. The room smelled of talcum powder and antiseptic. The garden was Alina's pride and joy, he said, voice wavering with age and emotion. She spent hours out there, especially after our daughter moved away, said it gave her purpose. Morgan let the silence stretch, watching as Henderson's gaze drifted back to the window, where a cardinal had landed on the feeder, its red plumage vibrant against the pale blue sky. "Did you ever meet Catherine Wheeler?" she finally asked, her voice gentle but clear. Henderson's hand stilled on his cardigan. The cardinal flew away, a flash of red disappearing into the distance. Alina mentioned a young woman had come by about the house, said she was being nosy, asking if we'd ever consider selling. His voice dropped to a whisper. Eleanor was very protective of that house. It was where we raised our daughter before she left us. Further investigation revealed that the Hendersons' daughter, Elaine, had run away at 17 after a heated argument with her mother. Eleanor Henderson had told neighbors that Elaine had gone to live with relatives in another state, but no contact information had ever been provided. No one in the small community had questioned this explanation. The Hendersons had always been private people, despite their community involvement. When Detective Morgan finally tracked down Elaine Henderson, now Elaine Bowman, living in a small town in Oregon, the picture began to take shape. My mother was possessive, Elaine explained during a video call, her face pixelated but her voice clear. After I left, she created this fiction that I was just away temporarily. She couldn't bear the thought that I had chosen to leave her. Catherine Wheeler, with her questions about the house, had represented something Eleanor Henderson couldn't tolerate: another potential loss, another threat to the home she had turned into a shrine to her absent daughter. What had started as a conversation in that overgrown garden had ended with Catherine becoming part of it forever. Walter Henderson died peacefully in his sleep 2 days after Detective Morgan's visit, taking with him whatever knowledge he may have had of his wife's actions that summer day in 1998. The official report listed Eleanor Henderson as the primary suspect in Catherine Wheeler's death, but with both potential perpetrator and any possible witnesses deceased, the case was once again closed, justice served only by the revelation of truth. As autumn turned to winter, James and Melissa Weber decided not to sell the house as they had initially planned after their grim discovery. Instead, they carefully cleared the overgrown garden, keeping some of the wildflowers but opening the space to sunlight once again. In the spring, they planted a small memorial tree for Catherine Wheeler in the corner where she had rested for so long, unnoticed but not forgotten. And in the quiet hours of early morning, when the first light filters through the trees, some neighbors swear they can see the silhouette of a woman tending to the garden, her movements as gentle as the breeze that carries the scent of wildflowers across the newly awakened earth. Story 3. The house had been abandoned for years, windows boarded up, furniture draped in sheets. Yet when the new owner arrived to inspect the property, one detail made him stop. The basement light, dim and yellow, was glowing through the cracks beneath the door. Thinking it had been left on by mistake, he stepped inside. The bulb was dead, the wires were cut, and in the dust on the floor, fresh footprints led into the shadows. Martin Calloway had purchased the Victorian home at 317 Sycamore Lane as an investment property. The house had been vacant since its previous owner, Eleanor Whitman, had moved to a retirement community 3 years earlier. The neighborhood had once been prestigious but was now in transition, with some homes meticulously maintained while others, like this one, had fallen into disrepair. The local real estate agent had been forthright about the property's condition: foundation issues, water damage in the east wing, a persistent smell of dampness that permeated the wallpaper, but no one had mentioned the basement. No one had mentioned the light that shouldn't be on. Detective Sarah Linden arrived 40 minutes after Martin's call. She moved deliberately, her notebook open, pen making soft scratches against the paper as she documented every observation. The sound echoed slightly in the empty house, mixing with the occasional creak of the floorboards beneath their feet. "And you're certain the electricity to the house was shut off?" Her voice was steady, professional, neither dismissing his concern nor amplifying it. Martin nodded, feeling the coolness of the air against his neck. The utility company confirmed it. "Nothing's been connected since Ms. Whitman left. That's why I brought my flashlight." He gestured to the heavy metal torch in his hand, its beam cutting a path through the dust particles that danced in the air. Detective Linden approached the basement door, her fingers resting lightly on the tarnished brass doorknob. "Have you gone down there yourself?" "Just to the bottom of the stairs. I saw the footprints and came back up to call you." The hinges protested as she pulled the door open. A waft of stale air rose to meet them, carrying the musty scent of earth and forgotten things. Together they descended, each step producing a soft groan from the wooden stairs. At the bottom, Detective Linden crouched, examining the footprints more carefully. They were distinct in the layer of undisturbed dust, a single set leading deeper into the basement, but none coming back. "Someone wearing work boots," she murmured, more to herself than to Martin. "Size 11 or 12, recent, within the last day or two." The basement extended beneath the entire house, divided by stone support columns and the occasional half-wall. Their flashlight beams created moving shadows that seemed to retreat as they advanced, revealing shelves of preserves left behind, boxes of holiday decorations, an old washing machine disconnected from its pipes. In the far corner they found the light fixture. As Martin had said, the bulb was intact but dead, its filament broken. The wires leading to it had been cleanly cut, not frayed or damaged by time. "This is unusual," Detective Linden admitted, her voice maintaining that same measured tone despite the puzzle before them. The footprints continued past the light fixture, leading to a section of the basement wall that appeared slightly different from the rest. The mortar between the stones looked fresher, less weathered. Detective Linden ran her fingers along the seam where this section met the original wall. "The property records, Mr. Calloway, do they mention any renovations to the basement?" Martin shook his head. "Not that I recall. The house has been largely untouched since the 1990s. The detective pressed against different points on the wall section, methodically, patiently. When she applied pressure to the bottom right corner, there was a subtle shift, almost imperceptible. She continued pressing until, with the softest of clicks, the section moved inward by half an inch. "It's a door," she whispered, her professional demeanor momentarily giving way to surprise. With careful movements, Detective Linden pulled the disguised door open fully. Behind it was a small room, no larger than a walk-in closet. The space was empty except for a wooden chair placed directly in the center, and on the floor beside it, a stack of yellowed newspaper clippings. The top article was dated 15 years earlier. The headline read, "Local woman still missing, police suspend active search." The footprints ended at the chair, which showed signs of recent use. The dust on its seat had been disturbed, forming the impression of someone who had sat there for some time. Detective Linden carefully collected the newspaper clippings, placing them in an evidence bag. Each one detailed the same case, the disappearance of Jessica Whitman, Aliner's daughter, who had vanished without a trace during her senior year of college. "The previous owner's daughter," Martin said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I remember the real estate agent mentioning something about family tragedy." As they prepared to leave the hidden room, Detective Linden's flashlight beam caught something embedded in the wall, a small metal object that reflected the light. Using a pen from her pocket, she carefully extracted it. A single key, old-fashioned, with ornate detailing on its bow. 3 days later, Detective Linden stood in the office of Alina Whitman at Silver Pines Retirement Community. The elderly woman sat across from her, hands folded in her lap, her eyes clear despite her 87 years. "We found something in your old house, Ms. Whitman," the detective said gently. She placed the key on the table between them. "Do you recognize this?" Alina's expression remained unchanged, but her right hand twitched slightly. "The room behind the basement wall," Detective Linden continued. "Did you know it was there?" "I built it," Alina replied, her voice surprisingly strong, "after Jessica disappeared. And the newspapers. I collected every article, every word written about her case. A pause, about my failure." Detective Linden leaned forward slightly. "Your failure, Ms. Whitman." The elderly woman's eyes drifted to the window, to the carefully manicured grounds beyond. Jessica wasn't taken by a stranger, detective. She wasn't missing, she was hiding. The confession emerged slowly, like water seeping through stone. Jessica had been planning to leave for months to escape her controlling mother, to start a new life somewhere Alina couldn't find her. The argument that final night had escalated. There had been a push, a fall. The basement steps were steep. "I panicked," Alina said, her voice now barely audible. "I built the wall. I kept the light on for her even after, for 15 years, until I couldn't stay in that house anymore." But who had been in the room recently? Who had left those fresh footprints that led to the chair but never came back out? The answer came from Jessica's college roommate, now a professor at the state university. She had a boyfriend Alina didn't know about. He's been searching for answers about Jessica for years. The light that shouldn't have been on, the cut wires, the presence that had sat in that chair, mourning in the hidden space where someone had once been concealed forever. Some mysteries, once illuminated, cast shadows deeper than the darkness they replace. The case of 317 Sycamore Lane was officially reopened the following day. And in the basement of the empty house, where the light had somehow glowed without power, the investigators began to dismantle a wall built to hide the truth. Story 4, the old Victorian house had layers of history hidden beneath its walls. As the renovators stripped the faded wallpaper, they found something unsettling. Names, hundreds of them, scribbled directly onto the wood beneath. Some had been crossed out, others underlined. At the very bottom of the list, in bright red ink, was a new name, theirs. Alina Shaw stood motionless, her gloved fingers still holding the edge of the peeling wallpaper. The late afternoon light filtered through dusty windows, casting long shadows across the exposed wooden boards. The house on Cypress Lane had been vacant for nearly 7 years before the young couple purchased it at auction. A steal, the realtor had called it. Now, as Alina stared at her husband's name written in what looked disturbingly like dried blood, she understood why. "Martin," she called softly, her voice barely audible above the gentle hum of the portable heater in the corner. Her breath formed small clouds in the chilly February air. The floorboards creaked rhythmically as her husband made his way up the narrow staircase. Detective Sarah Monahan sipped her coffee slowly, savoring the warmth as she reviewed the case file spread across her desk. 3 weeks had passed since the Shaws had contacted the police. The names on the wall had yielded some disturbing connections. 17 of them belonged to individuals who had disappeared over the last 60 years. No bodies, no evidence of foul play, just people who had vanished from their lives without explanation. The previous owner, Herbert Vance, had lived alone in the house for almost 40 years. A quiet man who kept to himself, neighbors recalled. He had worked as an archivist at the county records office until his retirement. After his death from natural causes, the house had remained empty, unwanted, until the Shaws came along. Sarah ran her finger along a photograph of the wall. The handwriting analysis had determined that the same person had written all the names except for the Shaws. That final entry was different, pressed harder into the wood, more urgent, more recent. The detective closed her eyes, listening to the soft ticking of the clock on her office wall. Something about this case felt personal, as if the writer of those names was sending a message directly to her. She had grown up 3 blocks from Cypress Lane. As a child, she had often walked past the Vance house on her way to school, feeling an inexplicable chill whenever she passed. In the basement of the county records office, the air was heavy with the scent of old paper and dust. Sarah moved methodically through the stacks, pulling files related to the house on Cypress Lane. The building had been constructed in 1887 by Franklin Mercer, a prominent judge known for his harsh sentences. After his death in 1902, the house had changed hands 12 times before Herbert Vance purchased it in 1978. What caught Sarah's attention was not what was present in the records, but what was missing. For several of the previous owners, there were no death certificates, no records of them selling the property, just new owners appearing in the tax records, as if the previous residents had simply disappeared. Back at the house, Martin Shaw carefully photographed each name on the wall. He had insisted they stay, despite Aliner's reservations. This could be important historical evidence, he had argued, his academic curiosity overriding any sense of danger. As an anthropology professor, Martin saw the wall as a macabre but fascinating artifact. Aliner wasn't convinced. At night, she would wake to the sound of scratching within the walls, like a pencil moving slowly across rough paper. She began to notice other things. Doors that were closed in the evening would be open in the morning. Objects moved to different locations, and most disturbing of all, the faint smell of copper that seemed to follow her through the house. Detective Monahan's investigation took an unexpected turn when she discovered Herbert Vance's journal hidden behind a loose brick in the basement of the county records office. The leather-bound book contained meticulous entries spanning 4 decades. Each entry corresponded to a name on the wall. "They speak through the house," Vance had written. "The walls remember what happened here. Judge Mercer never stopped passing sentence." The journal detailed how Vance had slowly pieced together the history of disappearances connected to the house. He believed Judge Mercer had never truly left, that something of him remained in the structure itself, continuing his work of judgment and punishment. Sarah sat in her car outside the Shaw residence, the journal resting heavily on her lap. The lights in the Victorian house glowed warmly against the twilight sky. She should warn them, tell them what she had found, but would they believe her? Would anyone? The next morning, Martin Shaw didn't show up for his lecture. Aliner called the police when she found their bedroom empty, the sheets on his side of the bed undisturbed. On the wall behind the peeling wallpaper, his name had been crossed out. The case of the house on Cypress Lane remains officially unsolved. Aliner Shaw never returned to the property after her husband's disappearance. Detective Monahan requested to be removed from the case, citing personal reasons. The house stands empty once again, its windows like dark eyes watching the street. Some say that if you pass by on a quiet night, You can hear the soft sound of writing coming from within the scratch of judgment being passed on those deemed deserving of sentence. And on the wooden walls behind the faded paper, new names continue to appear, waiting their turn. Story 5. It sat in the middle of the abandoned field alone, pristine, untouched by the elements. A porcelain doll with glassy blue eyes, its dress impossibly clean despite years of rain and wind. The hikers almost walked past it until one of them noticed something chilling. The doll was holding a locket. Inside was a photo of them. Detective Sarah Mercer's fingers traced the edge of the evidence bag, the plastic crinkling softly under her touch. The porcelain doll inside stared back with vacant blue eyes that somehow seemed to follow her movements across the dimly lit office. Outside, rain tapped gently against the windows, creating a rhythm that matched her slow, methodical breathing. 3 days, she whispered to herself, the sound barely disturbing the late-night silence of the precinct. 3 days since they found you. The hikers Jason Cole and Rebecca Winters had come into the station visibly shaken that Tuesday morning. Their weekend hike through Blackwood Preserve had led them to an abandoned field, miles from the designated trails. Rebecca had spotted it first, a child's doll sitting upright in tall grass, its white dress immaculate, blonde hair perfectly combed. But it was Jason who had noticed the small golden locket clutched in the doll's tiny porcelain hand. Sarah picked up the report, the paper soft between her fingers. She had interviewed them separately, and their stories aligned with unsettling precision. Both described the same cold sensation when they opened the locket to find a photograph inside a photograph of themselves from just 2 weeks prior, sitting at an outdoor cafe in town, unaware they were being photographed. The detective leaned back in her chair, which responded with a low, drawn-out creak. The sound echoed slightly in the empty room. She closed her eyes, allowing the gentle patter of rain to fill her thoughts. Something about this case felt different, not just unusual, but deeply personal. Her fingers reached for the manila folder labeled Blackwood Incidents. Inside were 3 similar reports spanning 15 years. Each described objects found in remote locations, a child's teddy bear, an antique music box, and now this doll, each containing photos of the people who would later discover them. The teddy bear case had gone cold. The couple who found it had moved away 6 months later, refusing further interviews. The music box had belonged to an elderly man who passed away shortly after reporting his discovery. Natural causes, the coroner had ruled. Sarah sipped from her lukewarm coffee, the bitter taste lingering on her tongue. The clock on the wall ticked softly, marking time in the quietude of midnight. Her eyes drifted to the evidence board where 3 photos were arranged in a neat row: the bear, the music box, and now the doll. Below them, a map of Blackwood Preserve with 3 locations marked in red. When plotted, they formed a perfect triangle. She pulled out another file, this one much older, its edges worn from years of handling. Inside was the history of Blackwood Preserve, once the property of the Blackwood family until 1967, when Alina Blackwood donated the land to the county following her husband's disappearance. Sarah had interviewed Alina's granddaughter yesterday. The woman spoke in hushed tones about her grandmother's doll collection, how Alina would talk to them as if they were alive, how she insisted they watched over the family. She made them herself, the granddaughter had explained, her voice trembling slightly. Said they needed eyes to see and hearts to feel. Each one had something special inside. The detective stood, stretching her stiff limbs, and walked to the evidence board. Her reflection in the glass overlaid the photographs, creating a ghostly double image. She placed a finger on the doll's location on the map, then traced a line connecting all 3 points. At the center of the triangle sat the old Blackwood estate, now just a foundation of crumbling stone hidden beneath decades of overgrowth. The rain intensified, drumming against the windows with growing insistence. Sarah felt a chill that had nothing to do with the room's temperature. She turned back to her desk where the doll waited in its evidence bag, those blue glass eyes still watching, still knowing. Her computer chimed softly, announcing an email. The forensics report on the locket had come in. The metal contained traces of soil unique to the Blackwood estate gardens. But more disturbing was the dating analysis. The photograph inside had been developed using techniques that hadn't been used commercially since the 1960s. Yet it clearly showed Jason and Rebecca at the cafe 2 weeks ago. Sarah's breathing slowed as realization settled over her like a heavy blanket. She reached for her phone, dialing Jason's number with deliberate care. 1 ring, 2 rings, 3, no answer. She tried Rebecca next with the same result. The detective gathered her coat, the fabric rustling softly in the quiet room. As she reached the door, she paused, looking back at the doll. For a moment, just the briefest moment, she thought she saw it blink. The next morning, 2 officers responding to a wellness check found an empty apartment. Jason and Rebecca had vanished, leaving behind only a single item on their kitchen table, a small porcelain doll with glassy blue eyes, clutching a golden locket. Inside the locket was a photograph of Detective Sarah Mercer, sitting alone in her office the night before, staring at an evidence bag. And in the corner of the photograph, barely visible in the shadows, stood a figure. A woman in outdated clothes, her face obscured except for a faint smile. On the back of the photo, written in faded ink, "The leaner watches, the leaner waits, the leaner collects." The doll on the table held something else, too. A small piece of paper with an address, the location of the old Blackwood Estate Foundation. Sarah Mercer's case file remains open. Her car was found abandoned at the entrance to Blackwood Preserve 3 days after she disappeared. Inside was her badge, her gun, and a handwritten note. "I understand now. The dolls are waiting." No other traces of Detective Mercer, Jason Cole, or Rebecca Winters have ever been found. But occasionally, hikers report seeing a porcelain doll sitting in different locations throughout the preserve. Park rangers never find it when they search. But sometimes people disappear in Blackwood, and somewhere Aliner's collection grows. Story 6, the real estate listing was clear, vacant, ready for demolition. But when the inspector walked inside, he felt it immediately. He wasn't alone. Dust covered everything except for a single chair in the center of the living room. On it, an old cassette recorder. He pressed play. Static. Then a voice, low, distorted. "You shouldn't be here." Marcus Reeves had been a property inspector for 23 years. He'd stepped into thousands of abandoned homes, felt the unique stillness that settles when human presence fades away. This house on Oakwood Lane was different. The air inside hung heavy, almost resistant, as if the emptiness itself had substance. His footsteps created hollow echoes against hardwood floors that needed refinishing, each board creaking a protest beneath his weight. The inspector's report would determine the final valuation before the demolition crew arrived next Tuesday. A routine job until it wasn't. The cassette recorder sat centered on that single wooden chair, its placement too deliberate to be coincidental. No dust had settled on either object. Someone had been here recently. Marcus hesitated before touching the device, his fingers hovering above the worn plastic. Professional curiosity overcame caution. The tape inside whirred reluctantly to life. After the voice spoke those 4 words, "You shouldn't be here," the recording continued with the soft sound of breathing, then silence, then breathing again. Detective Sophia Linden received the call at 4:37 p.m. Her coffee had gone cold beside case files that demanded attention. The caller's voice, Marcus Reeves, trembled slightly as he explained his discovery. Not just the recorder, but what he found after. The basement door that should have opened to emptiness. The smell that shouldn't have been there. The marks on the wall that told a story nobody wanted to read. "I've documented everything," he told her, "but I think you need to see this yourself." The house on Oakwood Lane had been empty for 3 years. Its owner, Alina Winters, had moved to a care facility after her husband's death. Their children had emptied the place of valuables and memories, leaving it to the bank, or so the paperwork claimed. Detective Linden arrived as afternoon light began fading. The house looked unremarkable from outside: peeling paint, overgrown yard, windows that reflected nothing but sky. She parked behind Marcus's sedan and noted his silhouette waiting on the porch, shoulders tense beneath his collared shirt. "I didn't touch anything else," he said by way of greeting. His glasses caught the fading sunlight as he nodded toward the door. "Everything's just as I found it." Inside, the house smelled of dust and abandonment, with an undertone of something sharper, something chemical. The detective moved cautiously, her footfalls precise and measured. "The recorder is still where you found it?" she asked. Marcus nodded, leading her to the living room. The chair stood like a sentinel in emptiness, the cassette player still perched atop it. Detective Linden circled it once, twice, studying it from every angle before leaning closer. "Show me what else you found," she said quietly. The basement door was located off the kitchen, a simple wooden barrier with a tarnished brass knob. It opened with surprising ease, no resistance, as if recently used. The smell grew stronger. Linden reached for the light switch beside the door frame, but nothing happened when she flipped it. "Power's been off for years," Marcus explained, retrieving a flashlight from his pocket. The beam illuminated narrow wooden stairs descending into darkness. "It's down there, on the far wall." They descended together, the wood groaning beneath their weight. The flashlight beam swung in slow arcs, revealing a concrete floor and bare foundation walls. Empty, except for a single metal filing cabinet pushed against the far wall, and beside it a collection of photographs, newspaper clippings, and handwritten notes carefully arranged in a collage. "I didn't get close enough to read anything," Marcus said, "but look at the dates." Detective Linden stepped closer, her eyes narrowing as she examined the display. News clippings dated back decades, missing persons reports, unsolved disappearances, all connected with red string to a central photograph, the house on Oakwood Lane, taken when it was newly built. "There's something else," Marcus whispered, directing the light toward the filing cabinet. Taped to its metal surface was a plastic evidence bag. Inside, a driver's license belonging to William Hartman, reported missing 18 months ago. His case had gone cold after 3 months of investigation. Detective Linden carefully photographed everything, her movements deliberate and unhurried. When she spoke, Her voice remained steady despite the chill that had settled between her shoulder blades. "Marcus, I need you to wait upstairs while I call this in." Alone in the basement, she returned to the cassette player she'd brought down with her. She pressed play again, listening more carefully this time. After the warning and the breathing came another sound almost imperceptible at first, the soft scratching of pen on paper. 3 days later, forensic teams had processed every inch of the house. The filing cabinet contained detailed journals documenting activities that spanned 30 years. The basement floor, when examined with luminol, revealed traces that told their own story. Ground-penetrating radar identified anomalies beneath the concrete that would require further excavation. Alina Winters, interviewed at Sunshine Valley Care Home, expressed confusion when shown photographs of the basement. "That's impossible," she insisted, her aged hands trembling. "We never had a basement." The architectural plans confirmed her statement. The house on Oakwood Lane had been built on a concrete slab foundation. No basement existed in the original design. Yet Detective Linden had walked those stairs, had stood on that impossible floor, had seen with her own eyes what shouldn't have been there. The case remains active. The demolition has been postponed indefinitely, and sometimes late at night, Detective Linden finds herself listening to that cassette recording again. The voice, the breathing, the scratching of a pen, documenting something that no one was meant to discover. And in those moments, she understands with perfect clarity why the warning had been left, why someone had wanted to keep people away from the house that wasn't empty after all. Story 7, it had been hidden behind a bookshelf, a small wooden door no taller than a child. The landlord swore it didn't lead anywhere, just old storage, nothing important. But when the tenant pried it open, there was no closet, just a tunnel stretching deep into the darkness, and on the floor, a set of tiny footprints leading inside. Emily Nichols had lived in the Victorian house on Maple Street for exactly 17 days before she discovered the door. An architectural historian by profession, she had been drawn to the century-old building's intricate moldings and original hardwood floors. The rental price had seemed surprisingly reasonable, a fact that now lingered in her mind with newfound significance. The discovery came on a Tuesday evening as Emily reorganized the built-in bookshelf in the study. Her fingers brushed against a slight groove in the wood paneling. A gentle push revealed that the entire right side of the bookcase pivoted inward with a low, reluctant groan of ancient hinges that hadn't moved in decades. Detective Marcus Holloway stood in that same study 3 weeks later, his weathered notebook open in one hand, a chipped department tissue mug of coffee cooling in the other. The room smelled of dust and old paper, with an underlying hint of something less definable, perhaps time itself, compressed into the walls of a house that had witnessed too much. "And you say the landlord, Mr. Grayson, claimed no knowledge of where this passage led." Holloway's voice was soft, deliberately measured, as he directed his question to Officer Patel, who had been first to respond to Emily's increasingly distressed calls. "That's correct, sir," Patel replied, referring to her own notes. According to Ms. Nichols, Grayson told her it was just an old coal chute or storage area that had been sealed off during renovations in the 1960s. He seemed genuinely surprised when she described the tunnel. Holloway nodded slowly, his gaze drifting to the door itself. It stood open now, revealing the entrance to a narrow passage that descended beneath the house at a gentle angle. The crime scene technicians had installed temporary lighting, the harsh fluorescence destroying the mystery but revealing details that daylight had never touched. Hand-packed earth walls reinforced with aged wooden beams, a dirt floor worn smooth by what could only be years of use. And those footprints, small, unmistakably a child's, preserved in a patch of softer soil near the entrance. They pointed inward toward the darkness. None pointed back. What did she find down there? A question directed at no one in particular, though Holloway knew the answer all too well. The file had landed on his desk that morning, the third such case in his 27 years with the department, but no less disturbing for its familiarity. The tunnel extended 42 feet below the house, opening into a small chamber roughly 8 feet square. The space contained a child-sized wooden chair, a small table, and a collection of toys that preliminary dating placed as manufactured between 1994 and 1996. A threadbare stuffed rabbit, a set of colored pencils worn down to nubs, a plastic tea set with dried residue still in the cups. And on the wall, scratched into the packed earth with what forensics would later determine was a child's fingernail, 5 sets of vertical lines, each set containing 5 marks except the last, which had only 3. 23 days. The property records lay spread across Holloway's desk at the station the following evening, illuminated by a single lamp that cast more shadows than light. The house on Maple Street had changed hands 7 times since its construction in 1897. The ownership history showed nothing remarkable until Holloway reached 1995, when the property was purchased by a Lawrence Grayson, the same man who now served as Emily Nichols' landlord. That same year, local newspapers had run a series of articles about 8-year-old Madeline Cooper, who had vanished while walking home from school. Her disappearance had triggered a county-wide search that yielded nothing but dead ends and a community's gradually fading hope. The case had gone cold within months. Madeline's parents had eventually moved away, unable to bear the weight of their empty home and unanswered questions. Holloway rubbed his tired eyes, the gentle rhythm of rain against the station windows providing a soft counterpoint to the ticking of the wall clock. The evidence was circumstantial at best. The toys in the chamber couldn't be definitively linked to Madeline. The footprints could have been there for years, preserved in the cool, dry conditions beneath the house. But something about Lawrence Grayson's reaction to Emily's discovery nagged at him. Not surprise or confusion, as one might expect, but something Officer Patel had described as a stillness. Grayson had simply gone quiet when told about the tunnel, his expression unchanging, his body motionless in a way that spoke of calculation rather than shock. The search warrant came through the next morning. Holloway and his team arrived at Grayson's current residence, a modern apartment overlooking the river just after 9. The landlord wasn't home, his neighbor mentioning something about a sudden business trip. The apartment was immaculate, minimalist in its furnishings, with none of the clutter that accumulates in a well-lived life. It was in the back of the hallway closet, behind a row of precisely arranged shoes, that they found the small wooden box, hand-carved and polished to a soft sheen by years of handling. Inside, wrapped in faded tissue paper, a child's beret with a butterfly design, a school identification card for Madeline Cooper, and a folded piece of notebook paper containing a child's drawing of a small door, a tunnel, and a room with a table and chair. Lawrence Grayson was apprehended 3 days later at a bus terminal in Oregon, a one-way ticket to Vancouver in his pocket. He offered no resistance, no explanations, just that same stillness Officer Patel had observed, a quiet that seemed to extend inward to some unreachable depth. The investigation continued, methodical and thorough. Ground-penetrating radar revealed no human remains beneath the house or in the surrounding property. The chamber yielded DNA evidence that matched samples from Madeline's parents, confirming her presence in that small underground room. But what happened after those 23 marks were scratched into the wall remained unknown. The tunnel had a second exit, it turned out, concealed beneath the garden shed behind the house, a path that led to the woods beyond and from there to anywhere. Emily Nichols didn't return to the house on Maple Street. She broke her lease and moved across town, though in her dreams she often found herself standing before that small wooden door, listening for sounds from the darkness beyond. Detective Holloway added the case file to his cabinet, another piece in a puzzle that would likely never be complete. Lawrence Grayson sits in prison now, convicted on evidence found in his apartment and in that underground room, but he has never spoken a word about what happened to Madeline Cooper. Sometimes in the quiet hours of early morning, Holloway finds himself thinking about those 23 marks on the wall, each one scratched by a desperate child, counting the days of her captivity. He wonders about the 24th day when no mark was added. Was it an ending or a beginning, a conclusion, or merely a transition to a different kind of darkness? The door under the stairs remains, sealed now by police order. But doors, once discovered, can never truly be closed again. They exist forever in the mind, standing slightly ajar, inviting questions that echo without answer down long, dark passages of possibility. Story 8, it arrived without a return address, tucked into the mailbox of an unsuspecting family. A single sheet of paper, typed in neat, precise letters, "I know what you did." Confused, they assumed it was a prank until they turned it over. There, attached with a rusted paperclip, was an old Polaroid of their backyard. In the background, barely visible in the trees, was a figure watching them. The Mercer family lived in a quiet suburb of Millfield, where the houses were spaced just far enough apart to create an illusion of privacy. Anna Mercer was the one who discovered the letter on that cool September morning, when the dew still clung to the grass and the faint smell of wood smoke hung in the air. The paper felt unusually heavy in her hands, almost as if it carried the weight of its own significance. Detective Alina Reed arrived at the Mercer home 3 hours later. She moved slowly through the entryway, noting the family photographs that lined the hallway, all perfectly aligned, all depicting smiles that seemed genuine. In her 17 years with the Millfield Police Department, Reed had developed an intuition for homes that held secrets. This one felt complicated. "When exactly did you receive this?" she asked, her voice low and measured as she slipped the letter into an evidence bag. The rustle of plastic seemed unnaturally loud in the Mercers' pristine living room. Anna and her husband David exchanged a glance that lasted a heartbeat too long. "This morning," Anna finally answered, "with the regular mail." Reed nodded, her eyes drifting to the Polaroid. The timestamp in the corner read July 18, 1997, 15 years earlier. The figure in the background was little more than a dark smudge against the tree line, but there was something deliberate in its positioning. Whoever it was had been watching the house, watching the family, from just beyond the reach of clear visibility. In the days that followed, Reed pored over the Mercer family history. They had moved to Millfield in 1996, leaving behind a small apartment in the city for the promise of more space and better schools for their daughter, Lily. David worked as an accountant. Anna taught piano lessons from their living room. They were, by all accounts, unremarkable. But something about the letter had shaken them more deeply than a random threat should. Reed noticed how David's hands trembled slightly when he spoke about it, how Anna's eyes kept drifting to the windows, scanning the tree line beyond their manicured lawn. A second letter arrived exactly 1 week later. Same paper, same typewriter. This time it read, "The ground remembers what you buried." Attached was another Polaroid, this one showing the Mercer's garden shed, the door slightly ajar, a shovel leaning against its weathered wood. Reed brought a forensics team to examine the shed and the surrounding soil. The garden had been meticulously maintained, with perennials arranged in perfect rows and a small vegetable patch that showed signs of recent harvesting. Nothing seemed disturbed. Nothing except for a small patch behind the shed where the earth was somehow different, darker, more compact, as if it had been disturbed and then carefully replaced. "We need to dig here," Reed said quietly to her partner. The sound of shovels cutting into soil filled the afternoon air as the Mercers watched from their kitchen window, arms wrapped around themselves against a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. 6 feet down, they found it a small metal box, the kind used for storing valuable documents. Inside was a single item, a tarnished silver bracelet with a name engraved on its inner surface, Caroline. When confronted, the story emerged in fragments, like pieces of glass that had been deliberately scattered. Caroline Wilson had been their neighbor in the city. She had discovered financial discrepancies in the records at the small investment firm where David worked, discrepancies that pointed to embezzlement. She had confronted him, threatened to report him. There had been an argument, an accident, they insisted. A push that sent her falling backward, her head connecting with the corner of a desk. "We panicked," Anna whispered, her voice barely audible over the gentle hum of the heating system. "We wrapped her in plastic, drove out here in the middle of the night. The house was still being built. No one saw us dig." Reed listened, letting the silence stretch between each revelation. The typewriter that had produced the letters was found in the home of an elderly man who lived on the edge of town, Caroline's father, who had spent 15 years gathering evidence, watching, waiting for the perfect moment to unravel the Mercers' carefully constructed life. As the Mercers were led away in handcuffs, Reed noticed Lily standing in the doorway, her face a careful blank. She was 17 now, the same age Caroline had been when she died. Reed wondered what secrets the girl had absorbed growing up in that house, what whispers she had heard through the walls, what she had seen in her parents' eyes when they thought no one was looking. The case file would eventually be closed, the evidence boxed and archived, the story reduced to a few paragraphs in the local paper. But for years afterward, neighbors would cross to the other side of the street when walking past the Mercer house. Children would dare each other to touch the garden shed. And sometimes, in the early morning hours, people would report seeing a figure standing at the edge of the property, watching the house from just beyond the tree line. A story passed down until it became impossible to separate truth from legend. Some secrets, it seemed, refused to stay buried. Story 9, she had been renting the apartment for months before she noticed it. The closet in the spare bedroom had always been stiff, the door reluctant to open. One evening, she forced it all the way. The back wall looked wrong, too smooth, too new. Curious, she knocked. It echoed, hollow. She pressed her ear against it, and for the first time, she heard its slow, rhythmic breathing. The Westbrook apartment stood on Monroe Avenue, a pre-war building with ornate moldings and hardwood floors that creaked with stories of generations past. Catherine Mercer had moved into apartment 3B in late November, when the Boston air carried the first whispers of winter. A graphic designer who worked remotely, She'd chosen the two-bedroom unit for its northern exposure, perfect for her makeshift home office. The spare bedroom, she decided, would remain largely unused, a space for occasional guests or storage. The property manager, a thin man with perpetually damp palms named Harlan Green, had given her a perfunctory tour during the showing. All original fixtures, he'd noted with rehearsed enthusiasm, running his fingers along the crown molding. When they reached the spare bedroom, he'd opened the closet door just an inch before letting it fall closed again. Standard storage, he'd murmured, already moving toward the bathroom. For months, Catherine used the spare room only to store cardboard boxes of books she hadn't unpacked and winter clothes waiting for the first snow. The closet remained closed, its stubborn door forgotten among the countless details of settling into a new home. Until that February evening, when the radiator in her bedroom hissed and clanked too loudly for concentration, and she migrated to the spare room with her laptop. The chill of the unused room had her searching for a blanket she remembered packing away. The closet door protested as she pulled, the wood swollen with age and humidity. She leaned her weight against it, feeling it give suddenly, swinging wide to reveal a shallow space with a single hanging rod and that peculiar back wall. Detective Morris Blackwood sat at his desk in the homicide unit, the case file spread before him under the harsh fluorescent light. The steam from his coffee mingled with the perpetual scent of paper and toner that permeated the precinct. Outside, Boston slept under a blanket of fresh snow, the city muffled and transformed. "Tell me again what made you call 911, he said, his voice low and measured, his pen poised above his notepad. The woman across from him clutched her paper cup of station coffee with both hands, as if drawing warmth from the rapidly cooling liquid. "The breathing," Catherine answered, her own voice steady despite the dark circles under her eyes. "And then the wall. When I knocked, it sounded hollow, and there was this seam, like it had been recently installed." Blackwood nodded, making a note. Unlike the detectives of television dramas, he moved with deliberate slowness, each gesture economical and thoughtful. 23 years on the force had taught him that rushing led to mistakes, and mistakes were how cases went cold. "You've been in the apartment since November, correct? And you never noticed anything unusual before?" Catherine shook her head, a strand of auburn hair falling across her face. "I wasn't in that room much, and honestly, old buildings make noises. I thought the pipes, maybe." The wall, when the forensics team had carefully removed it, revealed a space just large enough for a person to stand inside. A space where Eliza Cranston had been missing for 14 months before Catherine Mercer moved in. The previous tenant, a medical student named James Howell, had vanished 3 weeks before his lease expired, leaving behind most of his belongings. The hidden compartment had been meticulously constructed. Soundproofing material lined the inside, with small, almost invisible air holes drilled through the apartment's exterior wall. A narrow tube, disguised as part of the building's plumbing, allowed for the introduction of water. The careful planning spoke of patience, of time invested in creating the perfect prison. In the silent evidence room, Detective Blackwood spread photographs across the metal table. The compartment, the feeding tube, the waste disposal system, cruelly efficient, and most disturbing of all the marks. Hundreds of small, careful tallies scratched into the inside of the false wall. 427 days marked in sets of 5. Eliza Cranston had kept count. "The previous tenant is our primary person of interest," Lieutenant Sarah Keene said during the briefing, her voice carrying through the crowded room. James Howell, 27, third-year medical student at Boston University. His professors describe him as brilliant but withdrawn, no known connection to the victim before her disappearance. Blackwood studied Howell's driver's license photo projected on the wall, an unremarkable face, the kind that blended into crowds that neighbors would describe as quiet and kept to himself, the most dangerous kind of face. He's in the wind, Keene continued. Credit cards inactive since his disappearance. Passport hasn't been used. His family in Minnesota hasn't heard from him in over a year. In the hospital room, Eliza Cranston lay beneath white sheets, monitoring equipment beeping softly beside her. 14 months in darkness had left her skin with an almost translucent quality, her muscles atrophied, her eyes sensitive to even the gentlest light. But she was alive. Against all odds, she had survived. "She's not ready for a formal interview," the doctor told Blackwood, speaking in hushed tones outside the room. "Physically, she's recovering remarkably well, but the psychological trauma that will take much longer to assess." What they did know came from fragments Eliza had shared during moments of lucidity. The man had worn a mask. He had spoken rarely, and when he did, he disguised his voice. He had been methodical in her care, preventing bed sores, providing vitamins, treating the beginnings of infections with antibiotics. "He said he was saving me," she had whispered to the nurse who held her hand during the first night. "Saving me for when the world outside was gone." 3 weeks after Catherine Mercer discovered the false wall, James Howell remained missing. His face appeared on digital billboards across the state, on television news broadcasts, on the front page of the Boston Globe. The story captivated the public: the hidden compartment, the medical student who vanished, the woman who survived over a year in darkness. Detective Blackwood returned to the Westbrook apartments on a Wednesday morning, walking the perimeter of the building, studying its red brick facade and ornate cornices with tired eyes. Something about the case had worked its way under his skin, into the spaces between his thoughts. Something about the meticulous planning, the patient cruelty of it. In apartment 3B, now empty and sealed with police tape, he stood in the spare bedroom, facing the closet with its door hanging open. The false wall had been removed, the hidden compartment exposed like an open wound in the building's structure. "Why here?" he murmured to the empty room. "Why her?" The questions echoed without answer, and somewhere in the walls, the pipes groaned with the pressure of flowing water, a sound not unlike a human sigh. The case of Eliza Cranston and the hidden compartment in apartment 3B would eventually join others in Blackwood's filing cabinet, some solved, some not. James Howell would remain a ghost, his whereabouts unknown, his motives unconfirmed. And in Boston apartments with stubborn closet doors and walls that seemed just slightly too new, residents would sometimes pause, listening for the sound of breathing beyond the plaster, before telling themselves it was only the building settling, only the pipes, only the wind. Story 10. In the stillness of the night, a mysterious package arrived in the mail, shrouded in secrecy. Wrapped in a plain envelope with no return address, it held a single brass key, weathered by time's gentle touch. The homeowner, Sarah Miller, felt a strange familiarity, though she couldn't recall ever seeing it before. With a sense of curiosity tinged with unease, Sarah tried the key in every lock she possessed, but to no avail. It refused to turn, a silent enigma in her hands. Perplexed, she placed it on the coffee table, where the old grandfather clock in the hallway let out a solitary, haunting chime a sound that had long been silenced by broken mechanisms. Puzzled and unnerved, Sarah reported the peculiar event to the authorities, seeking answers to the enigmatic key that had found its way into her possession. Little did she know that this seemingly innocuous incident would unfurl into a web of darkness that would shroud her once peaceful suburban neighborhood. The responding officer, at first dismissive, attributed the key's arrival to a simple mistake in the mail, but Sarah's intuition whispered otherwise, a nagging feeling that something was amiss, something sinister lurking beneath the surface. Reluctantly, the officer took the key as evidence, sealing it in a small evidence bag that would soon become the focal point of a harrowing investigation. As the case file landed on the desk of Detective Robert Harmon, a seasoned investigator from the Special Victims Unit, a chill crept down his spine at the sight of the unassuming brass key. There was an unsettling quality to it, a silent menace that belied its ordinary appearance. Delving into Sarah's background revealed a life devoid of criminality, a retired teacher, a widow, a mother of two leading a quiet existence. No red flags in her financial records, no suspicious activities in her digital footprint. She seemed, on the surface, an innocent bystander caught in a sinister game. Forensic analysis yielded little, with only Sarah's fingerprints present on the key. The postmark on the envelope provided no clues, and the key itself, a standard Schlage, bore the marks of age and use. It was a dead end until Detective Harmon decided to run the key's unique bidding pattern through the department's database. A cold case from years past resurfaced, revealing an identical key pattern tied to a storage unit where horrors had been unearthed: blood-stained carpets, tools of cutting, and images of women whose fates had long been shrouded in mystery. The investigation had hit a dead end, the perpetrator elusive. As Harmon delved deeper into the case files, a chilling connection emerged. The key led to a man named Harold Jenkins, a former neighbor of Sarah's who had vanished without a trace. A substitute teacher with a shadowed past, Jenkins had left behind a trail of unanswered questions and unexplained gaps in his history. The hunt for Jenkins intensified, each new revelation painting a portrait of a man shrouded in darkness. The true horror unfurled when a hidden room was unearthed beneath the floorboards of a cabin linked to Jenkins, a room lined with rows of brass keys, each bearing a name and a date, a macabre catalog of lives taken. The keys unlocked a chamber of horrors, revealing the remains of victims long forgotten, their stories etched in the silence of the grave. Sarah, thrust into a nightmare not of her making, found herself at the center of a manhunt for a predator who had lurked in the shadows, his deeds hidden behind a facade of normalcy. As the search for Jenkins reached a fever pitch, a final confrontation loomed on the horizon. In a remote wilderness, the fugitive met his end, leaving behind a journal chronicling his atrocities and a chilling message for Sarah, a twisted legacy of obsession and violence. The aftermath revealed a legacy of terror, a tapestry of lives cut short by a predator's twisted desires. Families found closure in the wake of tragedy, while Sarah, forever changed by the darkness that had brushed against her life, sought solace in a world forever altered by the revelation of evil lurking in the most unexpected of places. And so, the case of the Keymaster remains a cautionary tale, a reminder that behind the facade of normalcy lies a darkness that can shatter lives and communities. In the silence of an evidence locker, a collection of brass keys bears witness to a truth too terrible to comprehend, a truth that speaks of the fragility of safety and the resilience of those who seek justice in the face of unspeakable evil. Story 11, the worn envelope, its edges tinged with age, bore a fresh stamp recently sent. With cautious hands, the detective unfolded it, revealing a single sheet of paper adorned with a hurried, uneven message. "I am sorry for what I did." A dampness clung to the paper, carrying a faint scent of iron. Upon closer inspection, a reddish smear along the bottom edge caught their eye, not made of ink. Detective Sarah Morgan, with precision honed by experience, secured the letter in an evidence bag, the touch of her gloved fingers deliberate. The forensics team's findings confirmed her suspicions the stain was human blood, matching DNA from an unsolved homicide that had plagued the department for years. The victim, a young journalist named Rebecca Warren, had been discovered in her apartment, bearing multiple stab wounds. Her laptop missing, her notes strewn about, hinting that the attack was linked to an ongoing story. Despite exhaustive efforts, the case had grown cold until this mysterious letter found its way to the homicide division. Lacking fingerprints save for smudges hinting at gloved hands, the paper and envelope held little clues. However, the postmark provided a vital light after months of stagnation. Morgan gathered her team in the dimly lit briefing room, walls adorned with images of crime scenes, timelines, and profiles that led nowhere. Pinning the letter's image at the heart of the board, she declared, "This changes everything. Our perpetrator shows remorse." Detective James Chen, her steadfast partner, examined the letter thoughtfully. "Or seeks to deceive us into believing so," he countered. "The blood may be a ploy, a cruel taunt." The unique typewriter impressions led the forensics team to a model long out of production, a rarity but not unattainable. They scoured antique shops and collections across the region, igniting a renewed fervor in the investigation. Delving into Rebecca's life, they learned of her relentless pursuit of truth, particularly in exposing corruption. Her last assignment delved into a wealthy family embroiled in local politics, marked by a patriarch's recent demise and ensuing familial discord. Interviews with Rebecca's boyfriend, Michael Barnes, unveiled subtle shifts in his demeanor, hinting at concealed truths. Rebecca feared she was being followed, he confessed, his voice tinged with regret. "I dismissed it as paranoia. I should have listened." As the detectives probed further, a second letter arrived, bearing the same typewritten message, soaked in blood. This time, the confession spoke of secrets too dangerous to keep hidden. Pursuing the clues, they arrived at the mansion of the deceased patriarch, focusing their attention on the eldest son, Richard. His collection of antiques included vintage typewriters, a detail that raised suspicion. Under scrutiny, his responses seemed rehearsed, lacking spontaneity. A breakthrough emerged when microscopic fibers on the envelopes matched stationery exclusive to the family's youngest daughter, Alina. Questioned, she unveiled Richard's request to borrow her stationery weeks prior. A search of Richard's home unveiled a hidden chamber, housing incriminating evidence, newspaper clippings, surveillance photos, and a vintage typewriter identical to the one in use. Blood analysis confirmed its link to Rebecca. Unexpectedly, a financial trail between Richard and Michael surfaced, detailing payments preceding Rebecca's murder. Confronted, Michael's facade crumbled. Rebecca had uncovered Richard's dark secret, poisoning his father for his inheritance, he confessed. "I only intended to intimidate her into silence. I never imagined he'd resort to murder." Alina's revelation of a damning recording sealed Richard's fate. In the recording, his voice rang clear. She must be eliminated for good. Attempting to flee, Richard was apprehended, his denials falling on deaf ears. The trial showcased the incriminating letters, the typewriter, the financial transactions, and Alina's damning proof. While Richard professed innocence, pointing fingers at Michael, The overwhelming evidence led to a swift, guilty verdict. As Richard faced justice, Detective Morgan approached Rebecca's grieving parents, offering solace in the form of closure. The blood-stained letters lingered in evidence, a poignant reminder that even the most meticulously planned crimes leave a trace. Remorse, whether genuine or strategic, proved to be the downfall of those who believed in the perfection of their misdeeds. Rebecca Warren's case became a cornerstone in detective training, emphasizing that breakthroughs could arise from the unlikeliest sources: a weathered typewriter and the burden of guilt weighing on a killer's soul. Story 12: The Mysterious Victorian House. She crossed the threshold, the dust dancing in the still air around her. The abandoned Victorian stood frozen in time, its peeling walls and draped furniture telling tales of neglect. Yet amidst the eerie stillness, a strange phenomenon unfolded. Each door she opened led back to the parlor, trapping her in a never-ending loop. No matter her efforts, the only escape was the entrance she came through. But when she turned back, the front door had vanished, leaving her stranded in a maze of familiar rooms. Detective Sarah Lind found herself at the heart of the mystery as the discovery of Morgan Pierce's lifeless body turned the once forgotten house into a crime scene. Forensic technicians moved silently through the dim interior, their presence ghostly in the shadows. The house, known for its unsettling reputation among locals, now held secrets darker than mere urban legends. The medical examiner's hushed voice revealed the chilling truth: Morgan had perished from asphyxiation, her serene expression belying the tragedy of her demise. Found seated in a vintage chair, she appeared almost as if she awaited a visitor, hands folded neatly in her lap, no signs of struggle marring her peaceful countenance. Questions lingered in the air as Lind delved into the case. Who had stumbled upon Morgan's lifeless form? A real estate agent showing the property, mistaking her for a trespasser until a closer look revealed the grim reality. The house, a relic of bygone days, had remained untouched since the passing of its previous owner, Eleanor Blackwood, shrouded in legal disputes and forgotten by time. Morgan, a young scholar drawn to architectural enigmas, had been captivated by the Victorians' mysterious allure. Her journal entries hinted at strange phenomena within its walls: acoustic anomalies, shifting doorways, and chilling cold spots that defied logic. Her pursuit of the truth had led her down a path fraught with peril. The investigation uncovered a disturbing detail in Morgan's autopsy, a trace of a rare alkaloid suggestive of shamanic rituals in her system. Her boyfriend's insistence on her dedication to research cast a shadow of doubt on the substance's presence. Deleted messages hinted at a mysterious connection to someone who shared her intrigue, someone who whispered cryptic truths about the house's forgotten past. Adam Reeves, an architectural historian entangled in Morgan's research, emerged as a central figure in the unfolding drama. His insights into the house's deceptive design hinted at a reality beyond mere optical illusions. Yet his alibi placed him far from the scene of Morgan's demise, leaving investigators grasping at straws in the dark. A revelation from Eleanor Blackwood's grandson unveiled a chilling legacy hidden within the Victorians' walls, a history of inexplicable deaths, always in the parlor, always in peace. Dubbed the Claiming by the Blackwood family, the sinister influence lurking in the shadows had claimed more than one soul over the years. A hidden compartment behind the parlor fireplace unveiled artifacts of ancient origin, their significance pointing to a deity of liminal spaces. The pieces of the puzzle began to align, painting a picture of forces beyond comprehension at play. Dust patterns revealed a spectral presence in the house, fingerprints hinting at an unseen observer during Morgan's final moments. As the investigation deepened, tragedy struck once more with Adam Reeves' untimely demise, mirroring Morgan's fate in eerie detail. A key clutched in his lifeless hand unlocked the hidden chamber, revealing secrets long kept hidden from prying eyes. His final words echoed a truth that transcended the physical realm, a revelation that once understood, bound one's perception to the house's enigmatic confines. The case, shrouded in mystery, remained unresolved as the Victorians' doors closed to the world, condemned by authorities to keep its secrets buried. Whispers of spectral lights and vanishing visitors persisted, weaving a tapestry of folklore around the cursed house. Some believed it claimed those who delved too deeply, while others saw Morgan and Reeves as seekers of ancient truths beyond mortal understanding. In the end, the truth remained as elusive as the exit in a house where every door led back to the beginning, a paradox of perception and reality entwined in a dance of shadows and whispers. The Victorian stood silent, a sentinel of mysteries lost to time, guarding its secrets with a vigilance that defied mere mortals' comprehension. Story 13, the apartment exuded an ancient aura, with its aging heating system emitting groans and the pipes rattling in a rhythmic dance of echoes. It was a familiar symphony to her. Or so she thought, until that moment. A voice, delicate yet unmistakable, drifted through the vents, breaking the usual monotony. It wasn't the typical distant murmurs of a neighbor's conversation. It was a whisper, almost beckoning, calling her name softly. Intrigued, she leaned in closer, her heart echoing the rapid beat of a drum. A chill breeze brushed past her cheek, and then in a tone almost playful, she heard the words, "I know you can hear me." Detective Morgan Shaw stood like a statue in the heart of the empty apartment, her gaze fixed upon the rusted vent cover that seemed forcibly removed from the wall. The forensic team moved with precision around her, capturing every detail with their flashing cameras. The missing woman, Alina Reeves, had vanished for a week before anyone noticed her absence, the discovery made only when a pungent odor seeped through the building. What they uncovered within the ventilation system defied logic. She reported hearing voices through the vents, Officer Patel recited from his notes. The building management dismissed her claims, attributing them to the old heating system's quirks. Shaw knelt by the vent, observing the scratches etched around its edges. These marks weren't caused by tools, she whispered to herself. The deep, erratic gouges in the metal hinted at a desperate attempt to pry the cover off from the inside. Alina had been a beloved figure, a kindergarten teacher with a radiant smile and a vibrant collection of thriving houseplants adorning her windowsill. Her absence was felt deeply, evidenced by the heartfelt cards her students had made in her absence. Her sister, the one who reported her disappearance, shared a troubling detail during her interview. She grew paranoid in the weeks leading up to her vanishing. Her voice trembled. Alina was convinced someone was watching her, speaking to her through the apartment vents. "I thought it was just work stress." Shaw revisited the apartment with a newfound perspective. The meticulously made bed, the untouched coffee mug in the sink, the chair positioned beneath the vent as though someone had been perched there, listening intently. The forensic report unearthed unsettling clues. Fibers matching Alina's cardigan were trapped in the vent. A foreign fingerprint lingered on the inside of the cover, and chilling audio recordings from Alina's phone revealed a haunting dialogue. Alone in her car, raindrops drumming a melancholic melody on the roof, Shaw listened to Alina's quivering voice followed by a spectral whisper, barely audible yet laden with eerie intent. The background investigation into the building's past unveiled a tapestry of unsettling events, former tenants fleeing, complaints of phantom noises in the walls, and even a case of carbon monoxide-induced hallucinations of voices emanating from the vents. Harold Weber, the building's superintendent, presented a composed facade during questioning until Shaw inquired about the occupants of apartment 4B. His demeanor shifted imperceptibly, a subtle tension betraying his stoic exterior. The investigation took a macabre turn when a concealed access panel was discovered in Alina's bathroom, leading to a clandestine maintenance passage running through the walls, a hidden conduit to the building's ventilation system. Within this covert passageway, a trove of items emerged, evidence of a clandestine presence. A flashlight, a water bottle, discarded food wrappers, all pointing to an intruder living within the walls, observing, waiting, whispering. The scrutiny of Weber's residence uncovered nothing amiss except for his computer, a digital trove of voyeuristic recordings, and a chilling journal chronicling his distorted fixation on Alina. Arrested in the dead of night while attempting to flee, Weber exhibited a disconcerting tranquility. "They all hear me eventually," he remarked to Shaw, his smile devoid of warmth as he was led away. The subsequent revelations painted a harrowing picture of Alina's final moments, sedated, coerced into the labyrinthine ducts, lured by false promises of sanctuary whispered through the metal veins of the building. Families of past tenants surfaced, sharing tales of misplaced belongings and loved ones plagued by unshakable paranoia, all pointing to a malevolent force lurking within the walls. Weber's trial unfolded with a chilling calmness, oscillating between claims of insanity and evidence of calculated manipulation. The jury's swift deliberations sealed his fate guilty on all counts. As Weber departed the courtroom, he cast a haunting gaze at Shaw, his parting words chilling to the core. "They'll still hear me," he murmured. "The building remembers, the whispers endure." The vacant apartment building now stands as a silent witness, its walls echoing with spectral whispers and chilling drafts that defy explanation. The new occupants, despite their reassurances, find themselves haunted by the building's past, a constant reminder that some secrets are buried deep within the walls, waiting to be heard. Story 14. In the hush of the night, a faint flicker danced across the baby monitor's screen, a mere glitch in the feed. The mother, Rebecca, brushed it off as mere interference, a trick of technology. But then the silence crackled, and a voice, soft as a whisper, slipped through the static, saying, "SHHH, go back to sleep." A chill crept down Rebecca's spine, her blood turning to ice in her veins. With a racing heart, she hurried to her son's room, only to find the crib empty, the window sealed shut, and the door securely locked. The only anomaly was the stuffed rabbit lying on the floor, its dark, glassy eyes fixed on her. Rebecca's scream pierced the night, tearing through her throat until it burned raw, echoing through the walls to reach the ears of her alarmed neighbors. Emergency services were summoned, and as they arrived, they discovered Rebecca cradling the stuffed rabbit, lost in a world of disbelief on the nursery floor. Her precious infant, Samuel, only 4 months old, had vanished without a trace. The investigation that followed was shrouded in mystery. No signs of forced entry marred the home, the security system steadfastly guarding the premises. The baby monitor footage revealed no anomalies except for that haunting voice and the crackling static that followed. How could someone slip in, snatch a child, and vanish without a trace, leaving nothing disturbed except for a simple toy? Suspicion fell upon Rebecca, her marriage to Daniel strained, their lives shadowed by the struggles of postpartum depression. Detectives noted her unnervingly composed demeanor during questioning, raising doubts among the community, casting shadows of doubt upon her grief-stricken heart. But then a glimmer of hope emerged. Tiny fibers, foreign to the household, were discovered on the nursery windowsill. They belonged to a rare climbing rope, hinting at the possibility of an intruder scaling the walls to reach the second-floor nursery. Surveillance footage from the neighbors unveiled a dark figure lurking in the night. A partial footprint matching specialized boots hinted at a skilled climber's presence. As the focus shifted, Daniel, returning from a business trip, found himself under scrutiny. Unusual calluses on his hands hinted at a new hobby rock climbing a detail that raised eyebrows. Financial records painted a grim picture, with a hefty life insurance policy taken out on Samuel, mysterious calls to an unknown number, and a hidden second family unbeknownst to Rebecca. The case took a sinister turn with the revelation of a hacked baby monitor, its signal manipulated to deceive. Tracking the digital breach led investigators to a chilling discovery in a basement, a woman named Elaine caring for Samuel. Elaine, Daniel's first wife, haunted by a past miscarriage, sought to reclaim what she had lost through a twisted plan involving Daniel, a plan fueled by greed and desperation. During the trial, the courtroom hushed as the baby monitor's enhanced audio played, unraveling the tangled web of deceit. The whispered words were chilling, but beneath them lurked another sound, a cough, unmistakably Daniel's, placing him at the scene of the crime he professed ignorance of. The truth emerged, condemning Daniel and Elaine to the full extent of the law. Rebecca and Samuel sought solace in a fresh start, far from the shadows of the past. The case served as a cautionary tale, prompting a reevaluation of security measures in homes across the nation. The sophistication of modern crimes, exploiting technology's vulnerabilities, served as a stark warning to all. Samuel grew up shielded from the memories of that fateful night, while Rebecca safeguarded the stuffed rabbit, a silent witness to the truth hidden in the whispers of the baby monitor. The monitor, a silent sentinel, had captured the truth in its own cryptic way, a truth that would forever linger in the shadows of the night. Story 15. Renovations always held the promise of unveiling hidden treasures. Among the debris of bygone eras, old newspapers, broken trinkets, forgotten photographs, a couple stumbled upon a peculiar discovery when they lifted the floorboards of their newly acquired Victorian-era home. Nestled beneath the aged wood lay a neatly folded letter, its paper fragile and its ink faded with time. Yet the words etched upon it were stark in their warning: "Don't trust the one who knocked." Before the couple could grasp the full weight of this mysterious message, 3 sharp knocks reverberated through the silent house, sending shivers down their spines. Sarah and Michael, drawn to the charm of ornate moldings and the rich history of the estate auction where they acquired the house, never anticipated the unsettling revelations their renovation project would bring. Detective Alina Reed, a seasoned investigator with weathered hands that bore witness to years of handling evidence, arrived at the scene with her partner. The exposed floorboards revealed a dark void underneath, where the ominous letter had been concealed. Reed, mindful of contamination, delicately retrieved the note, already touched by the unsuspecting couple. As the couple recounted the chilling sound of knocking, Reed delved into their backgrounds, finding no cause for suspicion. Sarah and Michael, newlyweds with solid reputations and stable lives, seemed genuinely shaken by the inexplicable events unfolding in their new home. However, the history of the house told a more intricate tale. Once belonging to the Hargrove family for generations, it had stood vacant for 2 years following the passing of its last inhabitant, Margaret Hargrove, an elderly widow who led a solitary existence. Despite her unassuming nature and lack of enemies, a sense of unease lingered. Forensic analysis traced the letter back approximately 2 decades, revealing a handwriting fraught with distress and urgency. Margaret, in her 60s at the time, lived with her late husband, Franklin, who had preceded her in death by 5 years. Reed's investigation widened as she combed through county records and interviewed acquaintances of the Hargroves. Franklin, a respected retired teacher known for his woodworking skills, had left behind pieces of his craftsmanship within the house. A former student recalled Franklin's descent into paranoia in his final years, hinting at a shadowy presence that haunted him. A breakthrough emerged during Reed's conversation with Margaret's sister, now residing in a care facility. Through her fading memories, a revelation surfaced: Margaret's fear of a relentless collector who came knocking, demanding payment for Franklin's gambling debts. Despite Margaret's intentions to sell the house to settle the debts, Franklin's refusal plunged them into a chilling confrontation with dire consequences. Returning to the house with a forensic team, Reed uncovered a grim secret concealed beneath the foundation. The cadaver dogs led them to a male skeleton, its fractured skull bearing witness to a violent end. Dental records excluded Franklin Hargrove as the victim, revealing the identity of Victor Mercer, a notorious loan shark and gambling collector who had vanished without a trace 2 decades prior. Further excavation unearthed a wallet containing Mercer's ID, sealing the fate of the long-missing figure in the shadows of the past. Forensic evidence and Margaret's hidden diaries found in the attic painted a harrowing picture of events that unfolded. Franklin's mounting debts, Mercer's menacing presence, and the fatal clash that ensued, all buried beneath the house's floorboards. Margaret, coerced into complicity out of fear and loyalty, bore the weight of the dark secret for years, haunted by phantom knocks that echoed in the empty rooms. The case, pieced together through meticulous investigation, provided closure long overdue. Victor Mercer's remains were returned to his family, marking a belated serving of justice. Sarah and Michael, unable to reconcile the house's haunting history, sold the property, leaving it abandoned amidst whispers of ghostly echoes in the night. The note, a chilling artifact of the past, remained in evidence storage, a stark reminder: don't trust the one who knocked. Margaret's cryptic warning lingered, leaving unanswered questions in its wake. Detective Reed reflected on the enigmatic nature of some mysteries, acknowledging that the truth may elude even the most astute investigators. As the house stood silent, its secrets buried beneath layers of time, the echoes of 3 distinct knocks in the dead of night stirred rumors of a past that refused to rest. Whether a specter of the past or a mere trick of sound, the house held its secrets close, guarding the memory of those who had succumbed to its dark legacy. Story 16, the real estate listing made no mention of a basement. The blueprints were devoid of any reference to it. Yet as the family unraveled the old carpet, they stumbled upon a concealed door. It bore a heavy, rusted handle. It took 3 of them to wrench it open. Stale air, thick with the scent of damp earth, greeted them as they descended the steps into the darkness. They anticipated finding storage space. Instead, they encountered a solitary chair beneath a swaying light bulb. And on the wall behind it, a series of photographs depicting them. The Mercer family had moved into the suburban abode in the dead of winter, when darkness enveloped the land early and the skeletal trees stood stark against the frigid sky. The 2-story house, with its weathered siding and creaking floors, exuded character, or so they had convinced themselves. Character and history. Little did they foresee the depth of history the house harbored, or the violent collision it would have with their present. Detective Sarah Connors arrived at the property with her partner, the crime scene unit already cordoning off the area with fluttering yellow tape. Mrs. Mercer's call had been fraught with tremors as she recounted the discovery beneath their living room floor. "We must document everything before anyone else ventures down there," Connors directed, donning latex gloves with practiced ease. Camera flashes punctuated the stairwell as the forensic team cataloged the scene. The wooden steps groaned under their weight. The basement, no larger than a standard bedroom, boasted concrete walls painted a dull gray. A single chair was affixed to the floor at the room's center. Overhead, the stark bulb cast harsh shadows, revolving slowly in an imperceptible breeze. Yet it was the array of photographs that held sway, 37 images meticulously arranged in chronological order. "These date back almost 4 weeks," remarked Connor's partner, scrutinizing the timestamps inscribed on the backs of the prints. "Look at this one, Mrs. Mercer dozing on the couch, Mr. Mercer at the kitchen table, the children in their rooms." The investigation unveiled no signs of forced entry, no shattered windows or tampered locks. The security system had remained inert. Nothing was pilfered. Only privacy had been violated, along with any semblance of security the family harbored. Forensic analysis revealed multiple fingerprints throughout the basement, many belonging to former proprietors of the house. Records divulged that the property had changed hands 6 times in the previous decade, each family departing within a year and selling at progressively reduced prices. None had alluded to the existence of a basement. "We must interview every past owner," Connors instructed, leafing through her notepad. The case grew more disconcerting as they retraced the property's history. Discrepancies marred the property records, blueprints modified between sales, permits lodged then retracted, inspection reports with redacted sections. A breakthrough occurred during the interrogation of the contractor who had revamped the house 7 years prior. His countenance drained of color upon glimpsing photos of the basement. "That chamber is non-existent," he asserted, his hands quivering. "I gutted that place to its foundation. No basement, no door. Nothing beneath the living room except soil and concrete. Data extracted from the memory card clandestinely nestled inside the light fixture unveiled hundreds more images depicting not only the Mercers but also prior families. Children slumbering, parents bickering, intimate moments, mundane rituals, all captured by an illicit eye. The case took a darker turn with the recovery of audio files from a weatherproof box buried in the basement's corner. Voice recordings of conversations held in the master bedroom, the kitchen, the living room. The audio quality suggested sophisticated microphones clandestinely ensconced throughout the house, though none were discovered during the initial sweep. "We must dismantle every wall," Connors declared, her voice taut with urgency. "Probe inside the air vents, light fixtures, electrical outlets. The culprit has been surveilling these families for years." Beyond the wall of photographs, investigators unearthed a narrow passageway leading to a diminutive monitoring station. A desk, a chair, a laptop linked to an array of wireless cameras, and a journal, its pages teeming with meticulous observations of each family that had dwelled in the house, their routines, their timetables, their disputes, their vulnerabilities. The script mirrored samples from the property's original builder, a man by the name of Edward Kelvin. Records indicated his demise during the house's construction, a detail that grew increasingly suspicious as the inquiry unfolded. No official record of death existed. No funeral arrangements were made. Edward Kelvin had vanished from public archives. The journal's final entries veered into the realm of delirium. Phrases like "they never glanced downward" and "they never perceived me" recurred incessantly. The concluding page bore a solitary sentence: "The subsequent family arrives tomorrow." Fingerprint scrutiny corroborated the detective's mounting suspicion. Edward Kelvin had never departed from the house he erected. He had retreated into its covert recesses, erecting a labyrinth of observation points from which he could scrutinize the families who believed they inhabited solitude. The manhunt spanned 3 days. They discovered him curled within a crawlspace amid the second-floor chambers, his physique gaunt and sinewy, acclimated to maneuvering through the narrow passages he had fashioned within the walls. His eyes blinked against the beams of flashlights, unaccustomed to direct illumination. During interrogation, Kelvin spoke of the families as if they were players in his private theater. He narrated observing them with the detached precision of a scientist monitoring subjects. He never made physical contact, never filched from them, never directly intervened in their lives. He merely observed, recorded, chronicled. They welcomed me, he informed the investigators, his tone gentle and logical. They signed the contracts, they became mine. The psychiatric evaluation concluded that Kelvin suffered from severe delusions, perceiving himself as a custodian of the house rather than an intruder. The families were transient lodgers in what he deemed his permanent abode. The Mercer family never revisited the property. Like their predecessors, they abandoned their possessions, salvaging only what could fit into suitcases. The house stood barren as the legal proceedings unfolded. The trial unveiled the expanse of Kelvin's surveillance grid, hidden chambers accessible solely via crawl spaces, observation points integrated into the very framework of the house, all meticulously orchestrated prior to the laying of the first brick. The house had been architected from its inception as a surveillance apparatus, its inhabitants unwitting participants in Kelvin's obsessive documentation. When the jury delivered its verdict, Kelvin displayed no reaction. He had already retreated into the edifice of his mind, where he could still wander unseen through the passages of the house, now existing solely in recollection. The property was eventually razed, its foundation excavated and filled. Yet for the families that had dwelt within, the intrusion persisted. They remained haunted not by what had been purloined from them, but by what lay hidden, observing, eavesdropping, recording their most intimate moments from within the walls they had entrusted to safeguard them. At times, in hushed instances, they found themselves glancing at air vents, light fixtures, the junctures where walls met ceilings, pondering if they were truly solitary now, pondering if they ever had been. Story 17, the aged library faced imminent destruction. Workers neared completion when a chance stumble revealed a concealed latch on a bookshelf. With a soft click, the entire case swung open, unveiling a narrow passage leading to a secret chamber. The air within was heavy, stagnant from years of neglect. No furnishings adorned the space, only a solitary chair at its center, firmly fixed to the floor. Etched repeatedly on the wall, a haunting phrase echoed, "I am still here." The construction foreman swiftly contacted the authorities. What had started as a routine demolition swiftly morphed into a darker mystery. Detective Morgan Walsh, a seasoned investigator with 2 decades of experience, entered the hidden room. His flashlight pierced the darkness, casting an eerie glow on the unsettling message that adorned the walls. "Secure the area," Walsh commanded the officers, his voice resonating in the confined space. "No one disturbs anything until forensics arrives." The library's history added layers of intrigue to the unfolding narrative. Once owned by the prominent Harrington family, the building had been gifted to the public following the mysterious disappearance of their daughter, Rebecca. Vanishing during her final year of college, all that remained was her abandoned car near the woods. Despite extensive searches, the case grew cold, with theories suggesting she had fled to start new, a notion her family vehemently rejected, believing a more sinister truth lurked beneath. As forensic experts meticulously combed through the hidden chamber, they uncovered hair and fiber samples embedded in the chair. Traces of blood and skin cells mingled with the scratches on the wall, hinting at a grim struggle. Initial analysis hinted at a young female's biological material, indicating a harrowing tale of captivity and resistance. Walsh delved into the Harrington family's past, unsettled by the timing of the library's donation post-Rebecca's disappearance. Further probing unearthed unsettling connections, the bookshelf concealing the hidden room installed by a contractor exclusively hired by Maxwell Harrington, Rebecca's uncle and family patriarch. Financial records hinted at exorbitant payments to the said contractor, raising suspicions of a hidden agenda. Former staff interviewed expressed shock at the revelation. None had known of the secret space, save for an elderly librarian recalling Maxwell's solitary hours spent in that area after closing. Maxwell insisted that section remain untouched, she recounted, unaware of the sinister truth lurking within. The investigation intensified as DNA evidence from the hidden room matched Rebecca's samples, painting a grim picture of imprisonment within her own family. A search warrant of the Harrington estate led to a chilling discovery, a journal hidden in Maxwell's study detailing his obsession with his niece and the sinister events that transpired. Confronted with irrefutable evidence, Maxwell confessed to his heinous deeds. Driven by fear of exposure, he had imprisoned and ultimately killed his own niece, burying her beneath the hidden room's floor. As excavations confirmed Rebecca's fate, justice caught up with Maxwell, bringing closure to a decades-old tragedy. The Harrington family, bearing the weight of sorrow and betrayal, witnessed Maxwell's sentencing, finding solace in the recovered remains of their lost daughter. The library, once slated for demolition, now stood as a somber memorial, a testament to a life unjustly taken and a truth long concealed. As the community mourned, flowers adorned the library's entrance, paying homage to a soul silenced too soon. Rebecca's message, etched in desperation, "I am still here," echoed through the halls, ensuring her memory endured, and justice prevailed, casting a solemn light on a dark chapter finally closed. Story 18, nestled beneath layers of forgotten belongings in the attic, the old box lay hidden, a relic of the house's past. Among the relics within were faded Polaroids capturing moments of joy and celebration, frozen in time, harmless memories, or so it seemed until she reached the final photograph. In that image, taken within her own living room, a sense of unease crept over her. The family depicted a woman with golden locks, a bespectacled man, and two children smiled obliviously at the camera, unaware of the ominous figure lurking in the shadows behind them. A mysterious man, watching from the hallway with an intensity that sent shivers down her spine. Rebecca descended the creaking wooden stairs, the weight of the photograph heavy in her hands. The house, once vast and empty, now felt oppressive, suffocating. Placing the photo on the cold kitchen counter, she scrutinized it under the harsh light, noting the uncanny resemblance of the setting to her own home, yet the faces of the family remained unfamiliar. Enter Detective Morgan, a figure cloaked in experience and intuition, his weathered leather jacket hinting at stories untold. With a keen eye, he examined the photograph, questioning Rebecca about the previous owners, the elusive Nelsons who had sold her the house. A trail of missing families unfolded as the investigation delved deeper, each residing in the house for precisely 1 year before vanishing without a trace. The revelation of the Sutherland family, the eerie details of their sudden disappearance, and the discovery of their preserved remains buried beneath the basement floor sent shockwaves through the community. The figure in the photograph, identified as Samuel Whitfield, the enigmatic architect of the house, long believed to be deceased, was at the heart of the mystery. As the investigation unraveled the dark secrets hidden within the house, a sense of impending danger loomed. Rebecca, now under police protection, found herself entangled in a web of trepidation. A chilling phone call in the dead of night, the mechanical click of a Polaroid camera capturing her every move, signaled that the sinister presence of Samuel Whitfield was far from eradicated. The house, now a haunting reminder of its grim past, stood abandoned, its walls holding onto secrets that refused to be fully exposed. The enigma of Samuel Whitfield lingered, his whereabouts unknown, his sinister legacy casting a long shadow over the unsuspecting. As the truth-seekers continued their quest for answers, a sense of foreboding pervaded the air. In the darkness, where shadows danced and whispers echoed, new photographs developed, capturing unsuspecting families in their grasp. The watchers, unseen and unfathomable, continued their vigil, their presence a chilling reminder that some mysteries are best left undisturbed. Story 19. The gentle current whispered secrets as it flowed lazily that tranquil morning, the water mirroring the sky like a flawless glass canvas. The fisherman, lost in his thoughts, nearly missed the peculiar sight of a weathered suitcase bobbing near the shore. Initially dismissing it as discarded belongings, he felt a shiver crawl down his spine as he approached, and was enveloped by a pungent, heavy odor that clung to the air like a sinister embrace. The case, tightly bound in chains with rusted edges marking its time in the elements, held within it a chilling truth. Instead of garments, it cradled haunting remnants, a tangle of hair, fingers frozen in a macabre grip, and nestled at the bottom, a cryptic message that sent shivers down the spines of all who read it. This isn't the first. Detective Sarah Mercer, with her keen eyes and unwavering resolve, observed the somber scene with a mixture of sadness and determination. The victim, a woman in her mid-30s named Catherine Walsh, displayed signs of a life abruptly halted, her once dark hair now a ghostly reminder of the waters that claimed her. The meticulous work of the medical examiner painstakingly captured every detail before the body was tenderly lifted from its watery resting place. It wasn't the method of disposal that gripped Mercer's attention, but the eerie precision with which the victim had been adorned, manicured nails, freshly styled hair, adorned in garments of luxury. She wasn't brought here to be ended, Mercer mused, her gaze following the gentle lapping of the water against the muddy shore. She was ready, presented. Catherine Walsh, a successful real estate agent known for her expertise in high-end properties, led a seemingly solitary life in an affluent neighborhood, her polished facade belying a hidden darkness. Colleagues described her as driven, meticulous, and fiercely private, making her sudden disappearance all the more perplexing. As the investigation delved into Walsh's meticulously curated world, her home revealed secrets of its own. Every corner exuded an air of perfection, furniture arranged with precision, surfaces devoid of even a speck of dust. The kitchen held meticulously labeled meals, the closet a rainbow of organized attire. Yet a lone drawer slightly ajar in her home office unveiled a leather-bound journal that whispered of unseen terrors. The final entry hinted at a lurking presence. He's watching again. The same car, different plates. Through digital trails and forensic analyses, a pattern emerged. Walsh's inbox overflowed with cryptic messages from unknown senders, all bearing the haunting phrase, "I see your perfection," sent at precise moments on various days. Her online searches hinted at a growing unease, a fear palpable in her quest for security systems and self-defense tools. Mercer pieced together the puzzle, linking the meticulous care in Walsh's presentation to the ritualistic nature of her demise. A breakthrough arrived in an unexpected guise, a pawn shop owner identifying Walsh's missing emerald necklace in the possession of a familiar face, Michael Linden, a nondescript maintenance worker with a penchant for the unnoticed. Surveillance footage painted a chilling picture of Linden's calculated movements, his quiet presence belying a sinister purpose. Inside his modest abode, a chilling tableau unfolded, a shrine to Walsh and others, each woman a reflection of the last, captured in unsuspecting moments of vulnerability. In the starkness of the interrogation room, Linden's facade of normalcy cracked under the weight of damning evidence. His admission, devoid of remorse, revealed a twisted rationale driven by his obsession with perceived imperfections. They were flawed, he uttered, his voice devoid of emotion. Their perfection was a facade, a lie I couldn't abide. Linden's meticulous cataloging of his victims' lives, his careful corrections of their perceived faults, painted a portrait of a man consumed by a dark compulsion. The search for the missing pieces of Linden's sinister puzzle led to the recovery of 2 more suitcases, each bearing the remnants of lives snuffed out in the pursuit of a twisted ideal. As the truth unfurled in the courtroom, Linden's detachment stood in stark contrast to the anguish etched on the faces of the victims' families. A life sentence sealed his fate, a sentence mirrored in the eyes of those he had wronged. For Detective Mercer, the case closed with a heavy finality, yet shadows of uncertainty lingered. What drove Linden to fixate on these women, to seek out and destroy their perceived flaws with chilling precision? The river continued its meandering journey downstream, carrying away the remnants of a dark chapter. But in the quiet of the precinct, amid the hum of fluorescent lights, sat the haunting reminders of lives intertwined by fate and darkness, a stark reminder that beneath the veneer of normalcy, monsters sometimes dwell, waiting for the moment of revelation, the crack in the facade that exposes the truth hidden in plain sight. Story 20. In the stillness of the night, a house lay silent, its windows dark, its rooms empty of life. For years it had stood abandoned, a silent witness to the passage of time. Whispers among the neighbors spoke of a young woman who had vanished without a trace, leaving behind a mystery that lingered in the air like a ghostly presence. When the new tenants arrived, eager to breathe life back into the neglected home, they were met with a chilling discovery. The bedroom, locked tightly from within, resisted their attempts to unlock its secrets. With a creak and a groan, the door finally relented, revealing a scene frozen in time. The air inside was heavy, thick with the weight of years gone by. Dust motes danced in the dim light, settling on surfaces untouched for too long. Yet amidst the stillness, something felt amiss. The bed was neatly made, the mirror polished to a sheen. And there on the desk, a solitary candle stood vigil, its wax long since melted into oblivion, a silent witness to the passage of time. But it was the notebook, open to a page filled with fresh ink, that drew their gaze. Detective Morgan, a figure of quiet determination, pored over the pages while forensic technicians combed the room for hidden truths. The writing, elegant and precise, belonged to Elise Winters, a name whispered in hushed tones, a soul lost to the shadows. Her words, etched in ink, told a tale of fear and foreboding. "I know he's watching me tonight," the final entry read, a plea for help lost to the void. The room held its secrets close, the walls echoing with the ghostly whispers of a woman long gone. As the investigation unfolded, a web of deceit and betrayal unfurled before their eyes. Elise, a paralegal with a keen eye for detail, had stumbled upon a truth too dangerous to ignore. Her meticulous notes, her hidden files all pointed to a sinister conspiracy lurking in the shadows of power and privilege. The room, a silent witness to her final moments, yielded its secrets grudgingly. Hidden compartments revealed a trove of damning evidence, a trail of breadcrumbs leading to the heart of darkness. The truth, like a serpent coiled in the shadows, waited to strike. Through the tangled web of lies and deception, Detective Morgan uncovered a truth too terrible to bear. Elise's voice, captured in recordings, echoed through the room, a haunting melody of justice denied. Vincent Harriman, a man of power and influence, stood at the center of it all, his hands stained with blood and betrayal. As the pieces fell into place, a portrait of greed and corruption emerged. The pharmaceutical giant, Westridge Pharmaceuticals, stood at the heart of the darkness, its sins laid bare for all to see. The price of their ambition, paid in blood and tears, echoed through the empty room like a mournful dirge. In the end, justice prevailed, though the cost was steep. Harriman, a wolf in sheep's clothing, was unmasked, his lies stripped bare for the world to see. The truth, a beacon in the darkness, shone brightly, illuminating the path to redemption. And so the house stood once more, a silent sentinel in the night, its walls echoing with the memory of a woman who refused to be silenced. Elise Winters, a name etched in history, a soul at peace in the light of justice. The room, her final sanctuary, whispered its secrets to the wind, a testament to the power of truth in a world shrouded in darkness. As the night deepened and the stars whispered their lullabies, the house stood silent once more, its secrets laid bare for all to see. And in the stillness of the night, a soft glow flickered in the upstairs window, a beacon of hope in a world fraught with shadows. Story 21. The tale unfolds in the quiet shadows of a closing costume shop, where old inventory found new homes in the hands of eager buyers. Among the remnants of forgotten disguises, a woman's gaze settled on a mask resting on a dusty shelf. Its delicate features held an unsettling, lifelike quality that drew her in, despite a subtle unease stirring within her soul. Placing the mask on the counter, she noticed a hesitancy in the cashier's eyes as he muttered, "That's not ours." Perplexed, she sought a clue on the mask's origins, but the absence of a tag left her with more questions than answers. Choosing to bring it home, she could never have foreseen the haunting events that would unravel in the dark of night. Awakening to a soft rustle, she sensed a presence in the room, a whisper of fabric shifting. Panic gripped her heart as she realized the mask was no longer where she had left it. An eerie chill settled in the air as she turned to find it perched on her nightstand, its gaze fixed upon her with an intensity that sent shivers down her spine. The woman, known as Catherine Reed, was later discovered by a concerned neighbor who stumbled upon a chilling scene in her home. The morning light spilled through the slightly ajar door, illuminating a stillness that belied the horrors within. Catherine lay lifeless on the bedroom floor, the mysterious mask vanished without a trace. Detective Morgan's arrival brought a solemn air to the investigation, as forensics meticulously documented the eerie tableau before them. Clicking shutters provided a haunting rhythm to the whispered conversations of the investigators, each detail scrutinized in the search for elusive truths. Amidst the ordinary surroundings, a sense of dread lingered, a single drawer ajar, a lipstick-stained water glass, and the frozen expression of terror etched upon Catherine's features. The cause of her demise remained shrouded in mystery, with no visible wounds or signs of struggle to offer a clue. Delving into Catherine's life, the detective uncovered a woman of precision and passion, renowned for her discerning eye as an art appraiser. Colleagues spoke of her uncanny ability to detect the subtle nuances of authenticity, a talent that now seemed to have led her down a path of darkness. A pivotal discovery emerged from security footage of the costume shop, revealing the cashier's bafflement at the enigmatic mask. Further inquiries exposed a web of secrets tied to the shop's murky past, where items from a deceased collector's estate held a sinister legacy. Forensic analysis unveiled microscopic fibers clutched in Catherine's lifeless hands, a macabre puzzle hinting at a malevolent force at play. As the investigation unfolded, a pattern emerged: similar deaths linked to the acquisition of peculiar masks, each victim bearing the mark of unbridled terror. Consulting with a retired detective, the case took a chilling turn as ancient symbols hidden within the masks hinted at a dark ritual of soul transference. Catherine's own journal revealed a descent into fear and paranoia, her final entries a testament to a lurking evil that sought to claim her very essence. The truth, stranger than fiction, coalesced in a narrative of dread and despair, a cycle of death and possession that spanned centuries and defied rational explanation. Surveillance footage captured a spectral figure leaving Catherine's home, wearing her likeness like a macabre masquerade, a harbinger of doom in the dead of night. The elusive mask resurfaced months later in a distant vintage shop, slipping through the grasp of investigators once more. Its insidious purpose remained a mystery, a harbinger of doom waiting to ensnare its next unwitting victim in a dance of shadows and whispers. As the detective safeguarded Catherine's journal, a silent sentinel to the horrors that lurked beyond the veil of reality, she knew that the mask's hunger would not be sated until it found a new host. In the stillness of the night, she felt the weight of unseen eyes upon her, a chilling reminder of the darkness that awaited those who dared to peer into the abyss. The mask, a vessel for ancient malevolence, bided its time in the shadows, a silent specter waiting to claim its next victim in a macabre waltz of death and despair. And when it found its mark once more, another soul would awaken to the haunting presence of an empty-eyed visage, a harbinger of nightmares yet to come. Story 22. The story of the new homeowners began with what seemed like a mere quirk: the crackling of the old intercom system late at night. A relic of the past, forgotten but still present in the Victorian manor they now called home. Daniel and Meredith Parker were drawn to the property, its charm blending history with modernity, despite the real estate agent's unease during their initial visit. One fateful night, curiosity got the best of the husband as he pressed the button on the intercom. A whisper, faint yet chilling, crackled through the speaker, asking, "Why did you come back?" His hands trembled, and his wife, standing behind him, denied ever uttering those words. The mystery deepened when they uncovered a hidden journal behind a wall during renovations. The elegant handwriting belonged to Alina, the previous owner, detailing her fears of her husband, Vincent. The final entry, dated 3 decades ago, hinted at a grim fate. Detective Sarah Reeves arrived at the manor in response to a call about a possible break-in, but she sensed there was more beneath the surface. Daniel led her through the house, recounting the eerie events that had unfolded through the intercom. As the investigation progressed, the truth slowly unraveled. Records pointed to a dark past involving Vincent and Alina Blackwood, with disturbing revelations surfacing as human remains were discovered buried beneath the garden shed. Vincent's sinister actions came to light as he confessed to silencing Alina, who had persistently reached out through the intercom even after her demise. His calculated deception spanned decades, shrouding the truth in a web of lies until justice finally caught up with him. The house, once a witness to unspeakable secrets, stood silent as Daniel and Meredith decided to part ways with it, unable to bear the weight of its history. A memorial for Alina brought a sense of closure to the dark chapter, with the garden now peaceful after being disturbed by the excavation. The intercom, a conduit for the past, was removed by the new owners, its whispers fading into memory. Detective Reeves, reflecting on the case known as the house that answered back, felt a lingering presence whenever she passed by the property, the echoes of the past carried on the gentle breeze, a reminder that some secrets can never truly be silenced. Story 23. The parcel arrived unannounced, cloaked in mystery. No return label, no tracking number, just a damp cardboard box kissed by the morning dew. It wasn't intended for Sarah Miller, despite her address being correct. The name Daniel Whitaker was a stranger to her. She hesitated, knowing she should have left it untouched on the porch, but curiosity beckoned her closer. With a tug, the tape revealed a VHS tape within, accompanied by a solitary sticky note that commanded, "Watch alone." Sarah held the black plastic cassette in her hands, feeling its weight, sensing an unspoken gravity within. The tape seemed to whisper secrets, its worn edges telling tales of the past. The handwritten note bore the marks of urgency, each stroke etched with purpose. As Sarah stood in her kitchen, the suburban sounds of everyday life continued outside, dogs barking, children laughing, lawnmowers humming, oblivious to the enigma that had just crossed her threshold. Against her instincts, Sarah inserted the tape into her old VCR. Static danced on the screen before morphing into a dimly lit room. The camera's angle was skewed, casting an eerie shadow over a man seated in a wooden chair. "My name is Daniel Whitaker," his voice echoed, laden with a weight Sarah could almost touch. "If you're watching this, someone found you, which means they'll find me too." Daniel's words painted a picture of innocence tainted by circumstance. He professed his innocence in the face of a heinous crime, his weary eyes pleading for understanding. The room around him spoke of transience, as if he were a ghost in his own life, ready to vanish at a moment's notice. As Sarah delved deeper into the tape's revelations, Detective Eliza Ramirez found herself entangled in a web of deceit. 5 tapes, 5 recipients, all pointing fingers at Daniel Whitaker, the prime suspect in a murder case. The evidence seemed irrefutable until the tapes unveiled a darker truth. Catherine Walsh's murder, initially a closed case, unraveled before Ramirez's eyes. The whistleblower's connection to a pharmaceutical giant, PharmaCorp, hinted at a sinister cover-up. As Ramirez dug deeper, inconsistencies surfaced, painting a chilling picture of manipulation and corruption. Sarah's involvement deepened with each package. She received documents exposing PharmaCorp's crimes, shedding light on a conspiracy that had ensnared an innocent man. With each tape, each revelation, the truth crept closer to the surface. The puzzle pieces fell into place when Sarah noticed a crucial detail in the tape, a reflection that led to a hidden stash of evidence. Together with Ramirez, they uncovered the heart of the conspiracy, unmasking the puppeteers behind the scenes. Justice was served not with a bang, but with a quiet resolve. Executives fell, the truth emerged, and Daniel Whitaker emerged from the shadows, a man transformed by the weight of injustice. As he and Sarah shared a moment of reflection, they understood the power of chance, of a wrong address leading to the right hands. The VHS tapes stood as relics of a journey through darkness, a reminder that truth often arrives in unexpected forms, waiting for the curious souls willing to unravel its mysteries in the dead of night. Story 24 started with a pocket dial, a faint whisper lost in static. The operator almost dismissed it, but then a voice broke through, a woman's voice, urgent and trembling. "He's here." And then silence descended like a heavy curtain. The number traced back to a desolate house, standing empty for years, its secrets buried in the shadows. No signs of intrusion, no disturbances in the air. Yet in the dimly lit kitchen, an old phone sat on the counter, its screen casting an eerie glow in the darkness. The call had been placed mere moments ago. Detective Morgan Reed, with a furrowed brow, pressed the playback button repeatedly, each time hoping for clarity. The whispered words lingered in the air, a ghostly echo of fear and desperation. This abandoned dwelling once belonged to the Sullivans, a family torn apart by a tragic fire that ravaged their home. Since then it remained untouched, a silent witness to the passage of time. "Background check on the number," Morgan inquired, turning to her partner, Detective Walsh. The answer came swiftly, registered to Catherine Sullivan, the deceased daughter of the family. A young woman who had perished in a car crash 3 years prior, her voice now haunting the empty rooms of her former abode. The enigma deepened as Morgan gazed at the phone nestled in an evidence bag. A spectral puzzle unfolding before her eyes, a phone from beyond the grave, reaching out from the void. The dust around it disturbed, as if an unseen hand had placed it there, a beacon in the darkness of the abandoned house. Forensic examinations yielded no tangible leads. No fingerprints, no footprints, only the echo of a voice long gone, yet inexplicably present. The recording, a mere 11 seconds of static and breath, held the key to a mystery that defied logic. Voice analysis confirmed the impossible. The voice matched that of Catherine Sullivan with an unsettling 98% certainty. The call, a spectral anomaly, had occurred at the exact time of her tragic demise, as if time itself had folded in on that fateful moment. Interviews with those who knew Catherine painted a portrait of a life cut short, a story unfinished. Her father, her mother, her boyfriend, all touched by her absence, all haunted by the echoes of a past they could not change. The truth lay buried beneath layers of deceit and manipulation, waiting to be unearthed. A breakthrough came in the form of a journal, a testament to Catherine's silent suffering. Pages filled with the gradual unraveling of a relationship, once filled with love, now tainted by control and fear. The final entry, a chilling revelation of impending doom, a plea for help written in silence. Confronted with the damning evidence, Catherine's boyfriend, Mark Jennings, faltered under the weight of truth. Denials crumbled, alibis shattered as the darkness of his deeds came to light. The buried phone, a silent witness to his malevolence, revealed the sinister truth hidden beneath layers of deceit. As the investigation delved deeper, a pattern emerged, a pattern of manipulation, of violence masked as tragedy. Mark's twisted games of control and deceit had claimed more than one victim, their voices silenced by his hand. The hunt for justice led to a chilling revelation. Mark, the puppeteer of pain, had returned to the scene of his crimes, a ghost haunting the halls of the Sullivan house. His arrest, a mere formality, as the weight of his sins bore down upon him. In the quiet of the courtroom, as the verdict was delivered, a sense of closure descended. Catherine's mother clutched the journal to her chest, a silent tribute to her daughter's unwavering spirit. Justice, not through supernatural means, but through the unyielding pursuit of truth, had prevailed. The phone, once a conduit for fear and despair, now rested in the evidence locker, a relic of a past best left undisturbed. Yet whispers lingered in the air, a reminder that even in death, voices can find a way to be heard. Catherine's story, a testament to resilience and the enduring power of truth, echoed through the empty halls of the abandoned house, a beacon of hope in the darkness. Story 25. Once upon a time, in a quaint old apartment with its fair share of quirks, a symphony of groaning pipes and creaking floorboards, a new tenant moved in. She quickly realized that the sounds she heard weren't quite ordinary. The footsteps that echoed from above were too precise, too deliberate for comfort. The strange thing was, she resided on the very top floor of the building. One fateful night, she mustered up the courage to tap the ceiling with a broomstick. The sound abruptly ceased, plunging the space into an eerie silence. Then, a single knock reverberated back to her from within the confines of the ceiling itself. Sarah Coleman opted to keep the knocking incident to herself, brushing it off as the building settling or perhaps a small creature finding its way into the attic. Despite the continuation of the mysterious footsteps that traversed her ceiling night after night, she adjusted her routines, cranking up the volume on her television, donning headphones to bed, anything to drown out the rhythmic footfalls that mapped out unseen paths above her in the dark. Detective Morris stumbled upon the apartment's peculiar tale when a maintenance worker stumbled upon a hidden crawlspace during routine repairs. While fixing a leak in the hallway outside Sarah's unit, the worker unearthed an unexpected passage concealed behind a section of drywall that defied the building's blueprints. Peering inside with a flashlight, he uncovered a makeshift living space, scattered food wrappers, discarded water bottles, a soiled blanket, and a weathered notebook. The building superintendent promptly contacted the authorities. Detective Morris, accompanied by his partner Detective Rivera, arrived on the scene to find the maintenance worker visibly shaken, muttering about someone dwelling within the walls and watching them. The notebook contained meticulous observations of Sarah Coleman's daily life, her schedule, her guests, her meals, her entertainment choices, even her personal habits like showering and sleeping. The handwriting, once orderly, descended into chaos towards the final pages, with cryptic symbols adorning the margins. The last entry read, "The subject no longer responds to my signals. She has chosen to ignore me. No one ignores me." Forensic experts meticulously combed through the crawl space, uncovering fingerprints that yielded no matches in any database. They unraveled a complex labyrinth of passages woven into the walls and ceilings of the building, some dating back decades based on structural assessments. These secret passages connected to 5 different units, culminating in observation points disguised as innocuous fixtures or minor damages, all leading to Sarah Coleman's apartment. Interviews with current residents yielded no unusual occurrences beyond the typical apartment noises. However, former tenants painted a different picture. 3 prior occupants of Sarah's unit recounted feeling a sense of being watched or hearing unexplained movements, prompting one to vacate after a mere fortnight. None had come forward with their experiences for fear of sounding paranoid. A breakthrough in the investigation surfaced when forensics uncovered microscopic blood spatter within one of the crawlspace compartments. DNA analysis linked the traces to Martin Weaver, a former tenant who had mysteriously vanished 4 years prior. Martin had resided in the apartment directly below Sarah's. Detective Morris delved deeper into Martin's disappearance, learning that he had raised concerns about noises emanating from the unit above his own, a reserved individual named Edward who had abruptly vanished after Martin's confrontation. Edward's enigmatic past unfolded as investigators peeled back the layers. He had traversed 6 different apartment complexes over 2 decades, consistently opting for top-floor accommodations, maintaining minimal social interactions, and departing without a trace. A neighbor from one of his prior residences recalled him as intense, fixating on the need for silence. Property records unveiled his ownership of secluded rural land. Venturing to Edward's remote property, investigators stumbled upon a cabin adorned with a chilling display walls adorned with surveillance photos, notes detailing residents from various apartment buildings, intricate maps of ventilation systems and structural vulnerabilities, along with meticulous journals chronicling the observations of the specimens and the maintenance of the habitat. At the cabin's heart, a corkboard showcased newspaper clippings of missing persons reports, 6 in total, a morbid tally of individuals who had resided in Edward's past abodes. Beneath the board, gouges marred the wooden floor, hinting at a heavy object dragged repeatedly. Cadaver dogs led the team to freshly disturbed earth behind the cabin, unearthing human remains, one grave after another. As forensic experts endeavored to identify the victims, Detective Morris revisited Sarah's apartment complex. Although the crawl spaces had been sealed, residents sporadically reported unsettling noises. During the installation of enhanced security measures, workers stumbled upon a chilling discovery: a newer notebook tucked in a corner where the ceiling met the wall, mirroring the previous one. The notebook's initial page bore a solitary line: "They found my old nest, but not my new one." The handwriting matched the preceding journal. The final page depicted a crude sketch of Sarah's unit layout, delineating a red-marked passage and a date for that very night. Rushing to evacuate Sarah, officers found her apartment deserted, with only her abandoned phone, blaring television, and running shower as remnants of her presence. In the misty bathroom mirror, a haunting message materialized, etched by a finger: "Look up." Above the shower, the ceiling panel had been removed. The manhunt for Edward, now identified as Edward Mercer, a former construction worker specializing in renovations, rages on. His intricate knowledge of building structures facilitated the creation of his hidden network of passages and observation points. Thermal scans of Sarah's building unveiled no evidence of current habitation within the walls. Sarah Coleman's whereabouts remain a mystery, her case entwined with a string of vanishing acts across multiple states. Law enforcement agencies have issued alerts to apartment managers regarding unauthorized alterations in concealed spaces. Amidst the harrowing discoveries of graves, journals, and victim photos, Detective Morris finds himself haunted by the image of Sarah, ensnared in the relentless echoes of footsteps from an upper realm that never existed. The footsteps that ceased when she dared to knock, only to echo back in response. In the quiet of his home, during solitary nocturnal hours, Detective Morris sometimes finds himself gazing upwards at his ceiling, attuned to the silence, waiting, pondering who else might be listening in the shadows of the night. Story 26. In the quiet of the night, they stumbled upon it in the attic, concealed beneath a worn-out blanket. A porcelain doll, fragile and ancient, its blue eyes painted, gazing wide and unwavering. Sarah and Michael, a young couple, were baffled by its presence, for they had never laid eyes on it before. They dismissed it with a chuckle, deeming it just another forgotten relic of the past. However, as darkness settled around them that night, an unsettling feeling crept into the air. A heaviness descended, stretching the silence into an eerie tapestry of unknown whispers. And when dawn broke, the doll had vanished from the attic, only to reappear at the foot of their bed, silently watching over them. Sarah and Michael had purchased the Victorian house at an auction, captivated by its intricate woodwork and enigmatic allure, oblivious to the whispers of its troubled history. Drawn to the stories embedded within its walls, they unknowingly stepped into a narrative that was yet to unfold. Detective Rachel Winters, a figure shrouded in mystery herself, received a call one crisp autumn morning. The scene she encountered was chilling. The female victim arranged in a contorted pose in the master bedroom, eyes wide with terror, while the male victim lay in the hallway, as if fleeing an unseen horror. No signs of forced entry, no struggle evident beyond those final, haunting moments. Deliberate positioning, Detective Winters murmured, her voice a mere whisper in the shadowed room, her recorder capturing every detail meticulously. The female victim, a doll herself, meticulously placed like a prized possession. The investigation delved into the neighborhood's memories, each tale adding a layer of unease to the unfolding narrative. Shadows dancing behind curtains, phantom laughter echoing in the night, whispers of a past that refused to stay buried. Forensic findings painted a peculiar picture: microscopic fibers of vintage fabrics, a trail leading from the victims to the attic, where the air held a stillness that spoke of secrets long kept. The absence of fingerprints, DNA, or footprints hinted at a presence that defied the physical realm, a ghostly touch, a spectral whisper. The history of the house unveiled a pattern of tragedy: previous owners meeting mysterious fates, strange occurrences haunting the halls. A doll maker and his daughter, their story woven into the very fabric of the house, their secrets buried within its walls. As Detective Winters unearthed the connections between the victims, a chilling realization dawned. Each had tampered with the attic, unknowingly awakening something that should have remained dormant, a force older than time, bound to the house by threads of sorrow and longing. Old photographs whispered of a doll maker's obsession, of a doll that defied logic and reason, moving between frames as if alive. Infrared traces revealed a path etched in porcelain dust, an unknown residue, a spectral hand guiding the way from attic to bedroom. A distant relative's revelations plunged the investigation into darkness, unveiling a world where dolls held souls, where spirits walked unseen among the living. The truth, a tapestry of shadows and whispers, eluded grasp, slipping through fingers like mist. The case, a labyrinth of unanswered questions, led Detective Winters to a solitary decision: to keep the doll, a vessel of unknown power, locked away in a cabinet of shadows. But the night held its own mysteries, as the doll vanished into the void, leaving behind a trail of confusion and doubt. The house changed hands once more, its history a burden that weighed heavy on the hearts of the new owners. The attic remained untouched, a shrine to forgotten memories, a sanctuary for the restless spirits that lingered in the shadows. Detective Winters, a specter of the past, retired into the silence, her final act shrouded in secrecy. A photograph, a memory sealed in an envelope marked "Never Open," a reminder of a truth best left undisturbed. And as the nights grew long and the stars whispered ancient lullabies, a small shadow danced behind the attic window, a soft laughter echoing in the stillness, a child's laughter, a ghostly echo of a past that refused to be forgotten. Story 27. The motel stood quiet and forgotten, its faded sign barely visible in the dim moonlight. It was a place where transient souls sought refuge for a night, a brief respite from their journeys. The receptionist handed her the key with a cryptic warning, his eyes betraying a hidden knowledge. Just avoid the last door on the left. he whispered, his voice barely audible. Intrigue stirred within her, curiosity pulling her towards the forbidden door. That night, as shadows danced along the hallway, she found herself standing before it. The doorknob sent a shiver through her hand, cold as ice. The door appeared like any other, nondescript and unassuming until she pressed her ear against it. A soft, rhythmic breath whispered from the other side, a sound both haunting and hypnotic. Detective Morgan Reed entered the room with a heavy heart, her footsteps muffled by the weight of the crime scene. The metallic tang of blood lingered in the air, a grim reminder of the violence that had shattered the peace. The room held secrets within its walls, a pristine bathroom, an untouched bed, and a lifeless figure sprawled on the floor. The young woman's features were frozen in a silent scream, her eyes staring into oblivion. Reed knelt beside her, careful not to disturb the fragile balance of evidence meticulously placed around the room. "This is the third one this season," the forensic technician remarked, his voice devoid of emotion as he captured the scene through his lens. "The same signature as before." Reed nodded, her mind already piecing together the puzzle before her. The victim's elegant attire clashed with the rundown surroundings, a stark contrast that spoke of a life interrupted, a story left untold. There was no robbery here, no simple act of violence. This was a crime of passion, of twisted desire. Back at the station, Reed delved deeper into the case, each piece of evidence leading her down a dark path. The victims shared a haunting resemblance, their lives cut short in the shadows of cheap motels. The press murmured about a predator on the loose, a phantom preying on unsuspecting women in the dead of night. As the days blurred together, Reed uncovered a thread of connection, a man known only as C, a colleague, a lover, a ghost in the shadows. The truth unraveled slowly, revealing a web of deceit woven within the walls of corporate power. Charles Emerson, a man of influence and secrets, stood at the center of it all. Emerson's facade crumbled under Reed's relentless gaze, his carefully crafted lies unraveling like a threadbare tapestry. The evidence stacked against him, a damning testament to his depravity. His mask slipped, revealing the darkness that lurked beneath the polished exterior. The trial brought closure, but for Reed, the echoes of the past lingered like a ghostly whisper. The media dubbed it the door on the left case, a chilling reminder of the horrors that lurked in the shadows. Emerson's sentence was just, his fate sealed behind cold steel bars. Yet in the quiet moments of solitude, Reed still found herself haunted by the memory of that fateful night. The motel keys, silent witnesses to a tragedy long past, served as a reminder that some doors once opened could never be closed again. And as she wandered down empty hallways, she couldn't help but wonder what secrets lay behind each door, what mysteries whispered in the darkness, waiting to be unveiled.